it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. Okay, my dear friends, here we go with something truly special for your Monday evening's entertainment. Here's a little teaser to get you excited about what's to come. And they call it Devil's Gulch, sometimes Hermit's Valley, a forgotten crater hidden deep in the Nebraska sandhills, a place older locals refuse to speak about after dark. Now, according to legend, a man was wrongly hanged there over a century ago, a hermit accused of witchcraft, murder, and making a deal with something far worse than the devil himself. On the day he died, the earth supposedly opened beneath the town and swallowed everyone whole. Most people dismiss it as folklore, until 4 teenagers decide to explore the valley for themselves. Now, what begins as a harmless search for hidden treasure soon uncovers something buried deep beneath the stone, something cold, ancient, and very much alive. Strange eggs, unnatural caves, parasites that move in the dark, and a horror that doesn't kill its victims immediately, because it needs them alive first. Now, with bodies turning inside out and something spreading beneath their skin, the survivors realize the legends surrounding Hermit's Valley may have been warnings all along. Tonight, we descend into one of the most disturbing underground horror stories you'll ever hear, where the real terror isn't what waits beneath the earth, it's what comes back out. The Mystery of Devil's Gulch, Nebraska. Part 1. Hermit's Valley is a large expanse of land located in the sandhills of Custer County, Nebraska. It's not a very well-known landmark, as it's a bit of a drive out into the country. The farms thin down into great spiraling hills, as the name suggests, until the road splits off to the left on a trail you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. You follow that until it ends, and the hills take over, and you have to walk the rest of the way. After about a mile of ever-growing hills, it just dips down into a deep crater about 80 feet down. At the bottom is a small expanse of stone, maybe 10 feet high. If you were to talk to some of the older folks in the neighboring towns of Ord, North Loop, or Broken Bow, one of them might be inclined to tell you a story. And the story goes that long ago, back in the pioneer days, a man named John Bainley settled a little cottage out there from the east. Back then the land was supposedly level and quite fertile. He lived here peacefully, farming his fields and tending to his animals. One day the bank in the North Loop was robbed. Nobody saw who it was, as the suspect covered their face with a bandana and made a quick getaway on horseback, shooting and killing the 2 female bank tellers and a man crossing the road in front of him. Authorities chased the thief down and eventually lost him not far from Bainley's farm. Assuming it could be no one else, they apprehended Bainley and put him to hang for murders he hadn't committed. Now this is where it gets interesting. Although nobody knew him other than a strange old hermit, it was claimed he moved here to escape persecution from the east. Persecution for being a witch. It was said they built a gallows right on his own land, and threw the rope around his neck not 5 steps away from his front door. The sheriff himself was said to hear him utter a curse with his final breath before they kicked the bucket from under him. As he gave out his final kicks, the entire ground within a mile gave way, and everyone was dragged down to their deaths. The money was never found. Since then, it's said his spirits pull down anyone foolish enough to get close, bringing them to their doom. Others say he's still alive and well, due to being a powerful witch with the powers given to him by Satan, and he takes those not wary enough into his now stone house to feast upon their flesh. I heard this story when I was about 7. My mother took me to get my hair cut, where a few old guys would gather there on a weekly basis and swap stories. Well, being close to Halloween, they decided to entice me with a spooky tale, and I was instantly captivated by it. I grew up absolutely loving horror and always wanted to go down to see the ghost or the witch, whatever it may be, but never had the opportunity. My best friend, Jen, loved horror as much as I did. After I told her what I'd heard, we made a promise that we'd go down there when we were old enough to drive. Well, sometime after graduating 10th grade, I was the first to get a license. We hadn't forgotten our promise, and at lunch we finally began planning our excursion. A couple of our other friends, Mike and Tristan, took their normal seats across from us. "Hey, what are you meatheads up to today?" Mike asked, his usual greeting. "Oh, nothing. Just planning on a trip down to the valley," said Jen with a grin. Well, it was obvious neither Mike nor Tristan had any clue what she was referring to. "That sounds pretty lame," Mike said with a chuckle. "I don't know. Could be fun," chimed in Tristan. "What are you going to be doing there?" "Well, did you guys ever hear of Hermit's Valley?" I asked. "Oh, I think I heard something about that. There's supposed to be thousands of dollars down in the bottom, right?" said Mike. "Yeah, and the ghost of the guy who put it down there," I said with a smirk. "What are you guys talking about?" asked Tristan. Tristan had moved to Broken Bow only a few years ago from California. He didn't know much about the history of anything in Nebraska. "Okay, so there's this old guy that was supposed to have robbed a bank, and when this other guy, John, got blamed and killed by the townspeople or whatever, he killed everyone and brought the whole place down into a giant hole, because he was actually this witch," Jen told them. "Witch? Don't you mean wizard?" Mike asked. "No, I mean a pair of fucking skis. Look, guys can be witches too, jackass," said Jen, throwing a piece of spaghetti at him. It landed on the side of Mike's mouth, which he slurped up with a smile. And eventually our conversation went elsewhere, but before lunch was up, we'd agreed to be ready the next morning at about 9 o'clock. The next day was Saturday. I packed supplies that I thought we'd need, and naturally my imagination was getting the best of me. Matches, flashlights, water, half a loaf of bread, and a whistle. I called the other three and each confirmed they were packed and ready to explore. Throwing my backpack into the trunk, I made my way to Jen's house. She was waiting for me on the porch, wearing a bright green dress and tennis shoes. A small handbag was slung around her shoulder. "Ready for a girl's day out?" I shouted. "You know it, Carrie," she called back. Getting into the passenger seat, she noticed the whistle around my neck. "What? You expecting to get Barbara Hershey?" Took me a second to understand what she meant. Then I remembered the movie, The Entity, where a woman by the same name was sexually assaulted by a ghost. I just don't want anyone to get lost. And if someone gets hurt, he'll thank me later. We pulled up to Tristan's house in regular fashion. He wasn't anywhere to be seen. "That crouton better not have gone back to sleep," said Jen, getting out of the car. "I bet he's not," I said as we walked up to the door. Well, we knocked and there was no reply. He lived alone with his mother, and I noticed her car wasn't there, which in our understanding meant come on in. So we opened the door. The living room was where he could usually be found, and today was no exception. He was snoring away on the couch, half a bag of Cheetos spilling down his messy shirt. Jen tiptoed over and picked one up. As slowly as she could, she shoved it into his open, drool-covered mouth. He didn't budge, and we both laughed quietly as she continued to see how many she could shove in there. She reached about 10 before he snorted and coughed, making Cheetos explode back onto himself. "Oh, what the hell?" he said as he began to chew the remaining chips. We both laughed hysterically, and I even got a picture on my phone before he wiped the mess from his face onto his arm. "Get up, butthole. It's already 9:30 and Mike's still waiting for us," Jen announced. With all the grace of a tranquilized grizzly bear, Tristan rolled off the couch and got up to his feet. "Yeah, give me a minute to get dressed," he said, walking up to his room. He came back down a moment later wearing the exact same pants with a different shirt. He carried alongside him a great big duffel bag. "What on earth do you need that for?" I asked in disbelief. "What do you even have in there?" asked Jen with the same stupefied tone I'd had. "Well, we're going to a place that has no life for miles around. I just want to be prepared. So I brought a rope with a grappling hook, a couple of pop-up tents, some MREs, and a few other things," he said smugly as he walked out the door. "Oh, we're not going to the frickin' Andes," called out Jen behind us. Well, it never hurts to be prepared, Tristan replied, turning back to her. Oh, hey, nice whistle, he said, looking at my chest. It's not... Oh, look, just get in the damn car, I said. Mike lived a little out of town where his parents raised some cattle. We were getting ready to turn when we saw sirens behind us. Seriously? I yelled as I pulled my car to the shoulder of the road. I could already hear and smell the cows from Mike's place. How fast were you going? Jen asked. I don't know, 30 miles an hour? That's not speeding, is it? I mean, there's not even any signs here that say. Eventually, the officer lurched open his door and walked toward me. It was Officer O'Shea, our school's resources officer. He tapped on the window, which I rolled down, and leaning on the hood like he owned the thing, he spoke in between long, loud, incessant chews of his gum. You finally got your license, eh? Well, you ain't gonna have it much longer if you keep speeding like that. License and registration. What? I was only going like 30 miles an hour. I couldn't have been speeding, I replied, handing him my information. Speed limit's 25 here. Not teach you that in driving school? Oh, I hate to do it, but I'm gonna have to write you a ticket, he said, getting off my car and flipping through his book of tickets. Seriously? For 5 miles over? Oh, fuck. I sighed, shaking my head. Hey, best watch your tone before I give you another ticket for something else, he spat back, ripping off my copy of the ticket and handing my stuff back. Have a nice day. And with that, he walked back to his car. $400? God, what an ass, I yelled, looking at the ridiculous pink piece of paper. Your tax dollars at work, Jen replied. We put the car back into drive and took the turn to Mike's. He was waiting on the porch, except he had no bag of any kind in his possession, just 2 claw hammers hanging dumbly from his belt loops. Hey, meatheads, what's going on? He yelled, running up to the car. Why do you have hammers hanging off your pants? Are you some kind of ninja turtle? I asked. What? No, you idiot. These are for protection. Be it witch, ghost, or hobo, I'll make sure nothing gets us, he said proudly. Jen laughed hard at this. Oh, we'll leave them. The last thing we need is for you to accidentally fix something. No, you'll see when we actually need them, Mike said, climbing in the back seat. All right, everybody ready? I asked. Everyone affirmed that they were, and we began the drive out of Broken Bow. The town quickly changed to long green hills as houses became fewer and fewer. Trees were sparse, although they naturally were anyway in Nebraska, aside from one narrow dirt road that led to an abandoned farm. That place always creeped me out. Yeah, the trees were hideously overgrown, with branches that looked like crooked broken talons that wanted to rake in anything that they could get their claws on. Sort of ironic being the home of Arbor Day. There was also a story about that particular place, but that's a tale for another day. We talked to each other about what we would do when we got out there. Mike was all for looking for old John Bainley and bravely taking him out with a hammer. Jen and Tristan were all about finding the bags of money that they were sure would still be there. I, on the other hand, was just happy to be seeing a place with so much history behind it. How many people have actually gone down there over the years? Possibly a handful? Well, there was always a tale about a friend of a friend who went there and ended up missing, but nobody had, to my knowledge, substantiated these stories. Eventually, we reached the turn to the final road. I'd almost missed it due to the overgrowth of tall grass, and I had to put the car into reverse. I parked it along the shoulder, and we all got out, grabbing our belongings. After locking the doors, we made our way down the winding path. The sun was now high in the sky, with not a single cloud in sight. It was already hot out, and shaping up to be a lot hotter. Jen and I were taking measured drinks from our water bottles, and Mike was going back and forth between us, like a dog begging for table scraps. Finally, offering Jen $40, she let him have a sip from hers, and proceeded to smack him when he finished it off. After half an hour of walking later, we saw the hills begin to sharply rise. I wondered if perhaps there was a volcanic eruption of some kind, or a meteor strike that made such a striking difference in the land. The trail wound around into a small canyon of sorts, and stopped around the next bend. In front of us for a good distance was nothing, and on the other side of nothing, more jagged hills. The sun didn't penetrate too far below, however looking down you could make out a stone structure. Luckily we didn't need the rope and grappling hook, as the sides of the hole were smoothed out enough to carefully make our way down. It took a good while, but we reached the bottom. The ground was surprisingly flat. No grass grew here, and it was all solid stone, which I thought seemed weird, being that most of the dirt around Custer County was more or less sand. We walked around, exploring our immediate area, and found no bones of damned children or ghosts. There was a lot of garbage, however. Tires, bags, furniture, even an old rusted car made their residence here. None of it was very interesting, but we made the best of it anyway. We ran around breaking stuff and making jokes about finding where Tristan's mum had moved to, which was fun for a while, and then we decided to check out the jutting stone in the center. It was a lot bigger than we previously thought. It was towering over us, around 30 feet, was roughly as wide as the base before slimming out as it went up. There were no clear indentations. It had once been a house. Tristan called out from the other side, and we went over to meet him, where he pointed out an opening against the base and the ground. It wasn't very wide, but before I could think much more about it, Mike was already squeezing his way in.
Part 2.
"Send down the rope if I yell," he blurted out before disappearing into the ground. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, calling out his name and seeing if he was okay. Then finally his head popped back up into view. "Guys, you gotta check this out," he said before vanishing once again. We decided, since he wasn't dead or trapped, we might as well. Jen went in first, followed by Tristan, and then myself. The tunnel leading down wasn't nearly as suffocating as I'd previously thought, and after a short, backward crawl, my feet met stone ground. Inside, the temperature felt about 40 degrees cooler, and while it was nice now, I eventually began to shiver. Everybody had their flashlight out, and were marveling over the sparkling stone all around. The walls appeared to be made of some sort of pink granite, and it was absolutely brilliant. The area we were in was large enough for us to fan out a few feet. Jen was taking a pocket knife and trying to break off a piece. "Can you stop?" Tristan asked. "Can you suck it?" Jen annoyingly replied. "Look, you're gonna bring this entire place down. Then the only ghosts here are gonna be us," he hissed back. "Oh, relax. It's been here for hundreds of years. I doubt it's gonna hurt it any," she said, finally plucking off a decent-sized stone from the wall. "See, everything's fine, you big baby," she said, showing off her sparkling prize. "Hey guys, looks like it keeps going down from here," I said, pointing to yet another body-sized hole off in the corner. Everyone walked up to investigate. From our flashlights, we could see that it dropped nearly 20 feet or so into more sparkling rock. "Awesome. Wonder how far this cave actually goes down. I gotta check it out," Mike said, grabbing Tristan's bag and pulling out a rope. "Seriously? I think this is far enough," said Tristan. "And we find something awesome and Tristan has to find a problem with it. Go figure," said Jen. "Well, come on, we're how far down already? Does anyone even know we're down here? Did you think to tell anyone?" Tristan replied. Well, we all shook our heads no, but it was obvious our spirit wasn't broken. "I'm just saying, let's not be outright stupid here," he said, shaking his head. "A bit late for that, ain't it?" Mike piped up as he handed one end of the rope to me. "Well, what if he's right, you guys?" I chimed in, tying the rope around my waist. "And if this thing does decide to come down, nobody's going to come looking for us." "Well, should have thought about that before taking the rope," Mike said with a smile as he began his descent. After a minute or so, he reached the bottom, and his gaze was fixated on something. "Oh my God, you guys, you gotta see this," he yelled up. Tristan decided to stay behind and keep an eye on the rope. The rest of us climbed down into the cramped hole, where it was absolutely freezing. My breath was noticeable as I tried to keep the stone off my skin, where the cold burned each time it made contact. The thought had never even occurred to me to bring a hoodie. The small pink cavern opened into a wide room. The pink sparkling stone was completely smooth around us, forming one big glassy-looking sheet. In the center of this room was a large, semi-transparent gemstone, roughly the size of a truck. "Oh my God, you guys, we're rich," Jen yelled as she ran up to run her hands across it. She immediately took one of Mike's hammers and began trying to chip off a chunk. "Dude, I can't believe this has been here this entire time and nobody's found it," Mike exclaimed happily. Of course, I was transfixed as well. This supported my meteor theory, and while I was mostly lost in thoughts of fame over such a discovery, looking at it made my gut tighten. "Hey guys, I think we should..." But I didn't get to finish. The piece Jen was breaking off cracked loudly and swiftly, breaking the stone nearly in half as one side almost toppled onto Mike. "Jesus Christ," he said, narrowly getting out of the way. "Did you get a big enough piece?" he yelled at Jen. "Sorry, but I did, and there's one for all of us," she said, eyeing some of the many pieces that broke off in the middle. "Right on," Mike said as he picked a fist-sized chunk up. "Aren't you going to take one?" she asked me. "Oh, I think I'm all set." "Why are they completely round?" I said, eyeing them with wonder. "Must be separate ones that formed in the middle," she replied, seeming satisfied with the answer. Mike was already stuffing others in his pockets. "Well, we've seen there's no ghost or witch, and we should go back now. It's frickin' freezing down here," I said, moving towards the exit. Everyone else agreed and we returned to the rope. "Hey, dumbwaiter, we're ready," Mike yelled up. Tristan held tight as Mike scrambled his way up. I was just grabbing the rope as I heard Mike shuffle against the wall. I looked up just in time to see his foot come down and make contact with my face. Everything went black, and my vision exploded into stars as my body hit the ground. "Oh shit, are you okay?" Mike asked. I groaned and sat up, feeling the blood drip down my nose. I put my fingers to it and could feel it was bent out of shape. "What the hell was that for?" I mumbled out as he and Jen helped me back to my feet. "Sorry, man. The rope slipped out of my hands. It's so cold down here I had, no traction." "I'm pretty sure you broke my nose." "Yeah, about that. Look, this is gonna hurt for a second." Before I could ask what he meant, there was another sharp crack of pain as he bent my nose back into place. "Yeah, much better. You can thank me later," he said, patting my head, and once again began climbing the rope. I waited for him to get to the top before grabbing it once again. The bleeding eventually stopped and I began pulling myself up, the blood seeming to give my cold hands traction. "For your troubles, my good man," I could hear Mike saying as he flipped a small round stone to Tristan. "Oh, awesome," he replied, putting it in his shirt pocket. I climbed up next, and Jen followed. We all made our way to the final entrance where the warm sun once again greeted us. "That was awesome, guys," Mike exclaimed, taking out one of his yellow round stones and looking it over. "Yeah, except for the part where you kicked in my face, you asshole," I mumbled. "Hey, what's that around your neck? Is that the come back and kick me whistle?" he replied smartly. Mike held up his stone to the sun, where it shone brilliantly. There wasn't much to it aside from a shady blob in the center. "Oh man, we're gonna make a fortune from this place," Tristan yelled. "No kidding. We're totally coming back sometime," Jen said with a big grin. We walked back to the car, the hot sun already making us forget about how incredibly cold it was down there. Everyone was panting and covered with sweat when we made it back. We got to town and I dropped Mike and Tristan back at their homes, making sure to go under the speed limit this time so Officer O'Shea couldn't say anything. We got back to Jen's house and hung out for a bit, looking at the stone she'd taken from the valley. "What kind of gem do you think it is?" she asked. Not really sure. I think amber's the only stone that color I know of." "You mean the sap stuff? Oh, that'd be great. I don't think it's as pricey as a diamond, but there are a ton of them down there. We'll still make a pretty penny," she said, passing it off to me. I was shocked by just how cold it still felt. "Yeah, probably. It's just strange, though," I said, eyeing the center of it through the sun. "What? That you don't want to make money from any of this? Yeah, that is pretty strange," she said, grabbing it back from me. "No, it's just that if this is in fact from a meteorite, I wouldn't think amber would be the thing to find. It should be some kind of metal or something." Jen's father, Sam, then came to the door. "Hey guys, supper's ready. You staying over to eat, Daniel?" he asked. "Nah, I gotta get going." "I appreciate it anyway, Sam," I said, getting up and walking over to my car. The sun was beginning to set now, and it cast an eerie blood-red shade across everything from its place behind their house. "All right, well, have a good one," he called back. "Yeah, come by tomorrow and we'll do something," called Jen. I squinted back at them, raising my hand in both a goodbye and agreement with them, and drove back to my home. Later that night, Mike never heard the cracking sound that came from the table across his room. Neither did he feel the slimy sensation crawling across his skin, and he especially didn't feel the stinging sensation when something bit into it and pulled its way through into his body. He slept quite peacefully, never once even tossing or turning. The next morning, however, he awoke feeling sore, and every muscle in his body ached something fierce. "Oh, must be coming down with the flu," he thought as he struggled to get up and went to use the bathroom. He flicked the light on and went over to the toilet. Nothing happened. Well, he knew he had to go, quite badly in fact, but nothing would come out. Mike pushed with all of his might, and finally a small splash hit the toilet, followed by a large, dark worm. He screamed as he grabbed onto it and desperately pulled. With a rip, the thing came out and he threw it down into the water, flushing the toilet. He looked over his body and saw multiple holes throughout his arms, legs, and chest. "Mom! Dad!" he screamed. Nobody came, and he remembered they were going to a gun show for the weekend. He cried as he ran to a drawer in his kitchen and grabbed a carpet knife. Blood flowed freely in dark rivers as he opened his skin and around the holes. Here and there he was lucky and was able to grab hold of a worm and rip it out. He ran out the back door and took a tumble down the stairs. Everything began to go black, and he could feel the creatures eating him from the inside out. Sharp little teeth fervently crunched down on his muscles and organs. What worms did escape slowly made their way to the barbed wire fence where the cows were noisily grazing without a care in the world. The next day I went over to Jen's to hang out. Sam greeted me at the door. "Hey there, how are you?" he said with a smile. "Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Is Jen around?" "Yeah, I think she's still asleep. It's almost noon. Come on in and beat on her dog," he said with a chuckle. I walked up the stairs to her room. The door was shut, and I listened, but I didn't hear anything, so I lightly tapped. "Jen," I called out. "Hey?" She sounded like she'd been crying. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. Something weird's happening." Her voice was shaky. "What is it? Are you hurt?" The door slowly creaked open, and she was indeed crying. I slowly made my way to her. "What is it?" I asked, looking her over. "I need you to look at something for me." She turned around and parted the hair on the back of her scalp, and I could see a small bloody hole. "What the hell is that?" I asked, leaning in. "I don't know. When I got up this morning, I saw blood on my pillow, and I swear I felt something move when I touched it," she said in a hushed whimper. I took a closer look, moving my fingers around the edge of the hole, when, for a flash of a second, something dark came into view and then disappeared again.
Part 3.
"What the hell?" I almost shouted. Moving away from her, she began crying again. "Get me some tweezers and a flashlight. We've got to get whatever that is out," I said, and she made her way to her connecting bathroom. She returned with them a moment later and handed me a small flashlight from her desk. I made her sit in the chair with her head against the top, and I slowly poked around the hole again, tweezers ready, and then I saw it. I grabbed a hold of the thing and pulled. Jen was obviously in pain as I slowly pulled a worm out of her head. It seemed to go on forever, as more and more of its slimy body came out until finally it pulled tight. I let go to get a better grip, and like a bat out of hell, it began to slither its way back in. Luckily, I was quick enough to grab its body about a quarter of the way back in, and I pulled again. Once it was tight, I ripped that sucker out, and I finally held a writhing thing roughly 1.5 feet long in front of my face. I panicked and looked for anything to throw it in and decided on the trash can. Tweezers and all made their way in, and I slammed the lid shut. "What the hell is that thing?" Jen screamed. Before I could reply, I ran to her toilet and threw up my breakfast. I've never liked the idea of parasites, and that was way too much for me. After a few minutes of gaining my composure, I went to see how she was doing. Sitting on her bed, she still sobbed. "We got it right. There's no more in my head," she asked as I sat next to her. I nodded, and she leaned towards her garbage can and slowly opened the lid. The thing was still moving around in there, trying to find a way out of the metal can, and she reached in real quick to grab the tweezers. Once again, she grabbed the creature and held it up in front of us. It was massive and moved limply back and forth. The body was black and segmented, which led to a mouth of sorts that opened wide with 4 large teeth in a square pattern and more inside. "I've never heard of anything like this. I don't know where I would have gotten it," she said, much calmer now. "The only place you could have gotten it was at Hermit's Valley." Well, saying this out loud caused me to shoot my hand to the back of my own neck. There was no hole, thank God, although every itch I had or muscle spasm that went off, my frightened brain chalked it up to being a worm. "Do you remember at any point feeling pain there?" I asked as she pulled a lighter out of her drawer and held the flame to the struggling creature. "No, there wasn't even any blood until this morning. I don't know how it got in me." The worm finally stopped moving and lay limply in her clutches. She put it back in the trash can and we stood up. "No, you should clean that up. Have you got any alcohol?" I asked. "Yeah, just a second," she said, going back into the bathroom. While she rummaged around, I took a look at her room. The bedding was messy, blankets and sheets thrown on the opposite side of the floor. A decent pool of blood stained her pillowcase, and on her other nightstand were her stones. The pink one lay shining in the morning sun, coming through the windows, and the yellow one was crumbled to pieces with a puddle of water that dripped off the side. All at once, it clicked in my head. "Jen!" I screamed to her. She came running back out with a concerned look on her face, and I pointed to the yellow rubble. The recognition on her face was instant. "The worm must have been from that stone," she practically screamed, running over to it. She grabbed every fragment she could and threw it into the trash. "We have to tell Mike and Tristan," she said, and began grabbing clothes from out of her dresser. "Hold on, I want to get your head fixed up first." She reluctantly came back over and crouched down. I applied the alcohol, which made her wince, and then put the bandage on as best I could around her hair. You finished there, Dr. Quinn, she said, standing back up. Yeah, but maybe we should hit the hospital too. We can do that after we check on them, she replied, going to the bathroom to change. I was able to get a hold of Tristan on the first ring. Hey, what are you up to? Tristan, you okay? Did you find any holes in your body? What the hell are you talking about? Is this some kind of stupid joke about my mom? No, those stones we got from the valley yesterday have some kind of worms in them. I just had to pull one out of Jen. Worms? I don't have any clue what you're talking about. Where's your stone? I think it's still in my pocket. Let me check. Hang on. A few minutes went by and finally he came back. Yeah, it's right here. I don't know what's going on, but it's really not funny. We're gonna come over. Put that stone in a bucket or something. Whatever, I'll see you in a bit. He hung up and Jenny and I got into my car. On the way over, Jan kept trying to call Mike, but was met with no answer. Do you think he's okay? She asked, on the verge of tears again. I don't know. He brought back a lot of them. Tristan's hasn't broken up yet, so maybe it's some kind of egg. God, that's so gross. I can't believe that thing was inside me, she said with a shudder. We made it to Tristan's house where he was seated in the living room. Hey, what the hell's going on now? He asked, holding the stone. I grabbed a mostly empty McDonald's cup on the table next to him and slapped it in. Hey, what's your problem? Dude, listen to me. These stones have some kind of worm in the middle. I don't know how it all works, but Jen's broke open in the middle of the night and crawled its way into the back of her skull. Yeah, bullshit. You're just jealous because you didn't get one, he said, pointing an accusatory finger in my face, which I slapped away. Look, damn it, I said, turning Jen around, pulling the bandage off, exposing the wound. Yeah, right, a worm did that. I'm sure she just smacked it against the cave sometime yesterday. I don't know what you guys are trying to do, but it's getting old, he said, taking his cup back and taking a last big sip of the remaining Coke. Oh, you idiot, I yelled, ripping the cup back out of his hands. I looked inside, and my stomach dropped. The stone was in pieces, and there was nothing else inside. Yeah, all right, you guys are getting on my nerves. Get out, he said, waving us off. Well, we continued to try and reason with him, telling him he needed to go to the hospital, but finally his mother came from around the corner. He said to leave. You two need to leave now, she said, opening the door. I growled in frustration, then Jen and I left. What are we gonna do? I'm not sure. Maybe it can't survive in the stomach. Either way, there's nothing we can do for now. We need to go check on Mike, I said, getting back into the car. The drive over was quiet. We made our way to the edge of town where we could hear the loud, frequent baying of cows. I wanted to slam down the accelerator, but I remembered the whole situation yesterday with Officer O'Shea. He'd be more than happy to pull me over again, and it was a good thing I didn't because he was sat in the same place by the concrete yard stuffing his face with a burger. We finally reached his place, and I saw his parents were gone. Jen and I got out and ran to the door, throwing it open. Mike, I called out. The living room was empty and dark. Mike, I called out again, and was greeted only by silence. I knew his bedroom was just under the stairs, so I slowly walked in towards it. The door was open, and I looked inside. I flipped on the lights and was in shock. Blood was all over his sheets, and broken yellow stones littered his floor with water soaking into the carpet. I heard a shriek come from the kitchen. I ran out and down the hall, seeing what had made Jen scream. A large amount of blood trailed from the kitchen leading to the back door. Just outside was Mike's crumpled body. What was left of his slashed face was bloated and purple. Deep gashes ran along his limbs and chest, and flaps of skin were pulled down to reveal muscle and bone. His discolored skin moved in smooth waves, contorting in sickly contractions. If I'd had anything left in my stomach, it would have all been gone in that moment. Pulled out my phone to call the police when I noticed dark heads poking out of poor Mike's body, and they were making their way toward us. There seemed to be no end to them as they came out in foot-long lengths. I looked around and grabbed a shovel that was leaning against the porch and started chopping them in half, then in quarters, until eventually there wasn't anything left. I yelled at Jen to call the police as I continued to kill as many of them as were coming towards us. Eventually I didn't see any more, and a cruiser came rolling up. O'Shea got out of the car, drawing his gun and pointing it at us. "Don't move," he yelled, slowly moving his way towards us. "Drop the shovel and put your hands on your heads." Jen began to protest, but the officer stopped her. "I don't know what happened here, but you can explain it down to the station. Till then, I don't want to hear a peep. Do you understand?" he said, looking to both of us. "Yes, sir," Jen affirmed, and I gave a nod. He handcuffed us one at a time and put us into the cruiser after reading us our rights. We've been down here now the rest of the day. I haven't seen or spoken to Jen since we left the booking station. They continue to question me over and over again, asking me why I killed him, why I hated him so much, why I keep making up stories about worms. Nothing I tell them makes any difference. All I can do is wait in my cell until I make bail. If I make bail. I can't sleep. The thought of Tristan drinking that Coke is weighing heavily on my mind.
So, the life of a moderately successful YouTuber is full of intrigue and, well, I don't know really. So between recording that and recording this little outro bit, I've cleaned out the cat sand, done some laundry, and I'm back here to finish off the video. So, yeah, quite glad to be back, to be honest with you. Anyway, so that's, would I describe that as the highlight of my day? No, probably getting this video together was the highlight. Weather's turned for the colder here. Maastricht, but hanging in there, and better days are coming. Can't wait for summer, to tell you the truth. Academic year is winding down, and I will have a lot more time and energy, more importantly, to devote to new stories here. A lot of new stuff coming. I promise more zombie stuff and others as well, coming soon. Anyway, that was it for tonight. See you all again real soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like throwing me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Good evening, seekers of places that should not exist, and welcome back to the Thin Hour, where the world forgets its own rules. I'll be your guide tonight as we drift off the map toward a structure the locals avoid naming and the forest seems determined to protect. Out here, distances lie, directions betray you, and familiar landmarks quietly rearrange themselves when you're not looking. So settle in, keep your bearings close. Some locations do not want to be documented, and they respond poorly to being observed. Tonight's story follows a man who went searching for silence and decay, only to find something that learned him faster than he could understand it. Beneath warped floorboards, a voice answered before it was called, and once heard, it refused to let go. It's not a tale of being lost, but of being kept, of paths that close behind you, reflections that move on their own, and a building that watches its visitors long after they try to leave. What hunts in this place doesn't chase, no, it replaces. So if you're ready to step into a landscape that bends itself around fear, where escape is an argument and identity is a liability, then stay with me. The church is waiting. The forest remembers every footstep, and someone out there already sounds exactly like you. I explored an abandoned church in Romania by Margot Holloway. Prologue. The forest in Romania wasn't quiet, not really. Even on still nights, the trees breathed, shifting their weight, creaking, whispering over the slopes. Fog pooled low between the trunks, carrying the scent of wet stone and decay, thick enough to choke a man who lingered too long. Travelers warned each other away, spoke of lost hikers, missing researchers, of those who vanished without a sound. But the warnings were useless to the curious, the reckless, or the desperate. At the heart of the woods, hidden in a clearing that seemed to fold in on itself, stood the church, abandoned, crumbling and crooked. Its stone walls leaned as if listening, its door half open like a mouth ready to swallow anyone that dared enter. The air around it was heavier somehow, colder, as though the forest itself hesitated before crossing its threshold. The locals called it cursed. Scientists called it a site of unusual geomagnetic anomalies. None explained why compasses spun, why voices echoed from empty hallways, or why those who entered often returned different, or not at all. If you stumble on the trail and see a pale light flicker between the trees, if the shadows bend just a little too far to watch you, or if the wind carries a faint voice you recognize, do not follow it. Step back, go home. Because once the church notices you, it waits, and it always knows when you step too close. Part 1. My name's Daniel Lorne, and I've worked as a freelance documentary photographer out of the United States for many years now. On the morning of October 14th, I reached the rural edge of Brașov County, Romania, chasing a proposal that required images of abandoned historical sites. I logged the entire day in my field notebook, and what follows was exactly what happened, stripped of decoration and guesswork. I recorded only what I saw, heard, and smelled. The day began cleaner than anything I'd experienced in weeks. By the time I turned onto the gravel road marked with the coordinates a local historian had passed along, the mist had already burned off the Transylvanian hills. He told me the site used to be a small Orthodox church from the late 1700s, left behind after a landslide severed the village that had once fed it. He said it like it didn't matter, his eyes sliding away from mine halfway through the sentence. I noticed the same reaction everywhere. People looked past me, and just shrugged, and cut their answers short when I asked about the place. No one outright refused to talk. They just didn't want to finish their thoughts. The road degraded into a dirt track and then into nothing. I parked the rental and continued on foot, my camera strapped tight across my chest, my notebook tucked into my vest. Well, the forest closed in fast. This wasn't the kind of woods that echoed. No, it swallowed sounds whole. Even dry leaves cracked under my boots like they were padded. Well, this air had a sharp metallic bite that set my nerves on edge. It was the kind of cold that really got to you. I told myself it was the elevation, isolation, maybe fatigue, nothing more. About half an hour in, I found the first marker. It was a wooden cross, sun-bleached and half-buried, leaned at an unnatural angle, like it had been shoved into the ground instead of planted there. The paint had been gone for decades. It didn't feel so much old as just wrong or out of place. I photographed it, logged the coordinates, and kept moving. All the trees dropped away without warning. One step I was boxed in my trunks and branches, the next I stood at the edge of a clearing almost cut perfectly into a circle. The grass was dead and pressed flat in uneven streaks, like something heavy had been dragged back and forth across it. At the far side stood the church. It was smaller than I'd imagined, a single nave and no bell tower. The roof bowed inward like it was tired of holding itself up. The front door sagged on one hinge, barely hanging on. Ivy had claimed most of the stone, choking the walls. But none of that stopped me. Well, what hit me first was the silence. No insects, no birds, no wind in the leaves. And the quiet felt I don't know how to say it, intentional, like something had pressed mute on the world. I stepped forward. The temperature dropped hard, even with the sun overhead. My breath didn't fog, so it wasn't true cold. No, it felt dense and weighted, like the air itself had been soaked in something colder than it should have been. I did what I always did. Wide shots, close-ups, notes with timestamps, evidence before interpretation. When I reached the doorway, a smell drifted out. It wasn't rot, it wasn't mold. It was something dry and sharp, metallic, like old coins heated in a pocket or rusted nails baked too long in sunlight. Inside leaked light through shattered stained glass, throwing dull red and green fragments across the stone floor. The pews sat in neat rows under a uniform layer of dust. No footprints, no signs of animals, no signs of graffiti, no proof anyone had been there in years. I stepped into the center aisle and raised my camera toward the altar. I adjusted the focus and I stopped. Someone had carved words into the front of the altar table. The cuts were shallow and rushed, scraped into the wood with something sharp. It was Romanian, sloppy but clear enough. I translated it in my head with what little I knew. Do not speak inside. It hears. I lowered the camera. The silence pressed in further then, like it was thick enough to feel. I told myself it meant nothing. Anyone could have carved that. Bored teenagers, superstitious locals, even the historian setting a trap for thrill-seekers like me. And that explanation sat in my head. Couldn't sit anywhere else, though. Something about the carving didn't line up. The grooves weren't worn down like the rest of the altar. They were crisp, recent, maybe a year old if that. The edges were still sharp, untouched by damp or rot. That alone should have been impossible. Well, I eased closer to the front and noticed the floor wasn't level. One of the stone slabs near the altar sat lower than the others, just enough to create a thin, deliberate-looking gap. I dropped into a crouch position, telling myself I was checking for subsidence. When my fingers brushed the stone, a vibration answered back. Well, it was faint, more felt than heard. Not a jolt, more like a steady thrum of distant machinery. It was controlled, repeating. I knew there were no factories anywhere near this forest, so I straightened fast, wiping dust from my palms. The metallic smell had thickened now, still subtle but no longer passive, like something had been disturbed and was now paying attention. I forced myself to keep working. That was the rule. Document first. Curiosity was the job. Fear was just noise. I took more photos, walls, icon frames, the rotting beams overhead. Everything looked right. Just abandoned, undisturbed. Exactly what history said it should be. But then something shifted. Well, not behind me, not beside me, not outside. It was below. A single intentional movement. Wood or stone taking weight. There was no skittering, no claws. No, something heavy had adjusted its position directly beneath the nave. I stopped breathing, and the quiet rushed back in, thicker than ever. My heart began to slam in my chest, loud enough that I was convinced it counted as sound. I stepped backward, slow and measured, already planning my exit along the same path I'd entered. I was halfway to the door when another sound rolled through the space. It was a voice. No, not a word, not even a whisper. It sounded like a throat being forced open after years of disuse. A thick, strained exhale, dragged out and wet with effort. I froze mid-step. God, every instinct told me to run, but I didn't. Not yet. The vibration returned, stronger now. The uneven stone near the altar trembled, then began to rise. God, something underneath was pushing it up. I couldn't move. The slab lifted less than an inch, but it didn't need more than that. The hairline crack opened and dust spilled out, drifting slowly into the dead air. And then it stopped. No follow-through, no second attempt, just that partial lift, like it was a test. Like whatever else below had measured its strength and decided to wait. I swallowed and forced air into my lungs, slowly and evenly. Years of fieldwork tried to assert themselves on me. Foundations settle, soil shifts, water moves underground. I'd seen all of that before. Yes, but none of it pulses with intent. None of it matches a rhythm. None of it exhales. I raised my camera again, not to shoot, though. My hands were shaking too badly for that. I think I just needed something solid between me and the room. A lens, a screen, a thin mechanical barrier to keep reality in place. As my finger hovered over the shutter, the vibration surged. It shot up through my boots, straight into my bones. Well, this time it wasn't rhythmic. No, it came in 3 slow, crushing pulses, like something massive bracing itself, and then silence. I shifted my weight and took one careful step toward the door. The floor creaked. God, the sound exploded outward, bouncing off the walls, magnified, stretched into something just plain wrong. The architecture shouldn't have carried it like that. God, my ears were ringing. The air thickened, pressing in from all sides. It felt like standing too close to a church organ when someone holds a low note. No sound you can hear, just the feeling of pressure bearing down, daring something inside you to break. I reached the doorway and put my hand on the frame. God, even the wood felt wrong. It was dry and ready to splinter, but it was also warm, warmer than the air inside, like someone had gripped the exact spot seconds before I did. I pushed the door another inch, and sunlight spilled across my boots. The instant it did, something inside the church shifted again. Not from below this time, though. Above. A faint scrape drifted down, almost too quiet to register, like timber settling under the weight. I tilted my head back slowly, bracing myself to see something mundane. A raccoon, a feral cat, or anything that would make me feel foolish instead of afraid. There was nothing there. No shape, no movement, but one of the rafters did sway just slightly. The motion was smooth and controlled. Didn't feel accidental at all. It felt, I don't know, aware. I stepped out into the clearing and forced my breathing to slow. The sunlight hit my face, and the warmth was immediate. God, only then did I realize how cold the interior had been. The contrast slammed into me hard enough to make the world tilt. I crouched and steadied myself with one hand on the ground. And when I looked up, I saw what I'd missed before. Tracks. Not footprints, not quite. There were shallow impressions pressed into the dead grass, smoothed at the edges, running from the tree line straight to the church. They were roughly the width of a human foot, but whoever or whatever made them hadn't lifted their feet cleanly. It looked like something had dragged itself forward, barely leaving the ground. The marks ended precisely at the threshold where I stood. I took a photo, then another from a different angle. As I lowered the camera, cold air brushed the back of my neck. I spun around, expecting to see the open doorway pulling a draft. But the entrance was still. No movement, no wind. Again, I tried to dismiss it. Forests do strange things with the temperature. Air pockets shift, wind tunnels through ridges. Yes, I repeated the explanation in my head until it sounded convincing. But it didn't erase what I'd heard beneath the floor. Her voice wasn't a weather pattern. I stood there long, too long, weighing my options. If I walked away now, without finishing the survey, it would haunt me professionally. God, every instinct screamed at me to leave the clearing and never come back. Every logical argument told me I couldn't justify abandoning the site without proof, though. And so, I turned back. Just once more, I told myself, long enough to identify the cause of this movement. The compromised foundation could be documented. An animal burrow could be explained. I didn't fully believe either, but they were the only explanations I had left. Inside the church, it looked darker than before. The stained glass seemed muted, as if the light itself had thinned. Dust hung in the air, perfectly still, suspended like it had been frozen mid-fall. And the temperature dropped instantly. It was sharp and just unnatural, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. I moved towards the altar, careful to skirt the uneven slab. I knelt and examined it closely this time, holding my hand just above the stone. Well, heat blared upward, not from the air, not from the dust. It was coming from the stone itself. Well, heat should disperse gradually. This didn't. It was focused, it was concentrated, like the warmth of a palm pressed against the underside. I stood, my pulse hammering in my ears. Is someone there? I asked, before I could stop myself. Well, my voice shattered the silence, loud and brittle like ceramic breaking on concrete, and regret hit me immediately. The words carved into the altar burned into my memory once more. Do not speak inside. It hears. Part 2. And then the floor jumped. Oh, not a tremor, just a violent slam from below, like something had hit the underside of the slab with all its strength. Dust detonated into the air. The nearest pew rattled and scraped across the stone. A sound ripped through the whole church, low, deep, and dense. A groan so heavy it felt like it vibrated inside my chest rather than in the space around me. I staggered back. The slab rose again. 1 inch, then 2. A crack split along its edge as whatever was underneath pushed even harder. I turned for the door, ready to run, ready to abandon everything. I reached the threshold. That's when I heard it. Oh, louder than before and much clearer. Human in tone and impossible in origin. A voice climbed up from the opening floor. It was strained, choked. It was whispered with effort. It spoke my name. Daniel. I ran. I didn't look back, not even once. Oh, my boots ripped through the dead grass as I ran for the tree line, my lungs burning as the cold air tore into them. Branches lashed my arms and face when I plunged into the forest, the canopy snapping shut behind me like a jaw. I didn't slow until my breathing turned jagged enough to threaten a blackout. But even then I didn't stop, I just eased my pace, forced control, and listened. Nothing chased me. There were no pounding steps, no snapping limbs, no voice using my name again. But still, the forest felt wrong. Well, the usual sounds hadn't come back. There were no insects, no wind, no birds. The deeper I pushed in, the more I noticed how my own footsteps vanished, swallowed by the ground as if the earth was padded to absorb sound. I reached a fallen log and dropped onto it, forcing my breathing into something steady. My hands shook hard enough to blur my vision. Well, I tried to assemble what had happened into something sane. It was acoustics, echo chambers, wildlife, structural failure. But none of it held together. The whisper from under the floor hadn't been random. It hadn't sounded like my name. It had been my name. It sounded familiar with it. I scrubbed my face and focused on inventory. Daylight remained. Most of my gear was intact. My notebook was still in my vest. I had more than enough documentation to justify leaving immediately. No editor would question walking away from a site that posed real danger. So I stood to orient myself, and my stomach dropped. The forest did not look right. I turned slowly, scanning for the path I'd taken in. I should have been there, faint maybe, but readable. Instead, the trees crowded in so close, packed together tighter than before. I moved in the direction I was sure I'd come from. Less than 30 feet in, the ground sloped downwards. But I hadn't done that earlier. I wasn't disoriented. I knew how to navigate. You don't lose your bearings after a straight-line sprint. No, the terrain itself had changed. I pulled out my GPS. The screen glowed weakly, flickered and then settled. The coordinates locked in several hundred meters north of the clearing. Well, impossible. I reset it and waited, watching the satellite icon blink. When it refreshed, the numbers were the same. Somehow, running straight out of the clearing, I'd gone the wrong way entirely. Well, I forced my thoughts into order. The clearing was south. The car was about 20 minutes from where I'd entered. If I kept the slope to my left and descended gradually, I should intersect the old track again. And so I started moving. About 10 minutes later, the ground flattened out without warning. I checked the GPS again. Same coordinates, same blinking satellite indicator, same dying battery symbol, despite it being fully charged that morning. Then a branch snapped to my right. I froze so hard my breath caught in my throat. It hadn't sounded like an animal shifting its weight. No, it had been sharp, sudden, and heavy. "Hello?" I called out, then immediately regretted it as the altar warning slammed back into my head. My own voice felt obscene in this silence. No answer. Then another crack, closer this time. I heard leaves compress under the weight. I backed up slowly until my shoulders pressed against the rough bark of a pine. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I scanned the trees without turning my head too much. Nothing moved. No shadows, no shapes where shapes shouldn't be. And then something pulsed at the edge of my vision. It wasn't motion. It was light. A faint warm glow flickered between the trunks, rhythmic and steady, like firelight being cupped by someone's hands. I turned toward it carefully. The glow brightened, then dimmed, shifting position without advancing. Someone else was out here, I told myself. A camper, a shepherd, a hunter. Anyone human would be a lifeline. I moved toward the light, my steps slow and deliberate. The glow stayed half hidden, slipping between trees, always just far enough ahead that I couldn't see its source, only its presence, waiting, pulsing, and leading me deeper into the forest. A few minutes in, something about the light started to bother me, though. It wasn't fire. There was no orange, no yellow. It carried the dull amber tone of an old tungsten bulb, steady and artificial, just a little bit wrong. Nobody hauls a lamp like that into the middle of the wilderness. The light kept appearing ahead of me, and then slipping off sideways, then resurfacing further on. It didn't rush, it didn't flicker wildly, it just moved with intention, like it was showing me where to go. My legs almost locked up on their own. A deep, animal part of me pushed back hard. Those same instincts that had kept me alive in places I shouldn't have walked through were screaming not to follow this. But the alternative was turning around and heading back toward the branch snaps and unseen weight shifting behind me. And so, I kept going. When I reached a dense wall of pines, the glow brightened briefly, washing the trunks in soft gradients of amber. I brushed past one of them and stopped short. There was something wrong about the bark. It was smooth, like it had been worn down or sanded by hands instead of weather. Well, that hesitation nearly made me turn back. Then I pushed through the last tight cluster of trees, and the clearing opened up in front of me. The same clearing. Same circular shape, same dead, flattened grass, same unnatural symmetry. And standing dead center, exactly where it had been before, was the church. I stopped breathing. 5 seconds had passed before I even realized it. I'd run from it. I'd walked straight for half an hour without turning. My GPS had insisted I was far north of the site. Yet there it was, waiting for me like I'd never left. The amber glow behind me faded out, snuffed cleanly away. Inside the church, something shifted, slowly, heavily. Purposeful. Whatever had spoken my name wasn't trapped beneath the floor anymore. It was moving through the nave. I stood there staring, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were feeding it. It felt like the world had folded in on itself, like the forest had bent reality and dropped me back at the start of some closed loop. It wasn't the church that had changed. The air had. The stillness around it thickened. It was pressing in like the space itself had noticed me again. And the sound echoed from inside. A footstep. This wasn't debris. It wasn't an animal. Not settling wood. This had human cadence. I stepped back without thinking. My boots crushed dead grass, and the sound travelled too far, carried and magnified as if the clearing had become an acoustic chamber. The movement inside stopped then. I didn't breathe. 1 second passed, then another, then a second step sounded closer to the doorway. My pulse slammed so hard my vision narrowed at the edges. I had to leave. I had to find any direction that didn't drag me back to that place. So I turned toward the tree line, choosing a different angle, and forced myself forward, fast but quiet. My whole body shook, the cold creeping under my skin in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting something to step out of the doorway. Well, nothing did, at least not yet. I crossed into the trees and kept moving until I'd put as much distance between myself and the clearing as possible, and only then did I let myself breathe normally again. The forest felt different now. The air was warmer, and a faint breeze stirred the branches overhead. For a brief, dangerous moment, hope crept in. Maybe the clearing was a fluke, some geological oddity, an echo trap, a broken structure amplified by fear and exhaustion. Then the breeze died mid-motion. It stopped like a door had been slammed shut on the wind. I kept walking, slowly, carefully, deliberately. I marked my path this time, scratching lines into bark, noting twisted roots and scarred trunks, tracking direction by the sun whenever it broke through. But every few minutes the forest shifted. Trees crowded closer together. The ground pitched when it shouldn't have. My markings vanished or reappeared on the wrong side of the same trees. Then my chest tightened. Oh, the forest wasn't following geography anymore, and I had no way to navigate something that didn't respect direction. Then I heard it again. A faint exhale behind me. It wasn't close and it wasn't loud. It was just enough to brush the edge of my hearing. So I turned slowly. Again, there was nothing there. No figure, no movement, no broken branches, just the forest standing perfectly still, watching. I needed elevation. I needed perspective. See the land. Find something fixed. I spotted a gentle rise ahead and forced myself toward it. The climb helped. The burn in my legs, the drag in my lungs. Those were familiar sensations. Physical effort anchored me when my head wouldn't. When I reached the top, I stopped and pulled in a deep breath, expecting a valley, a road, anything that would tell me where I was. And the clearing sat directly below. The same clearing, the same perfect circle of dead grass, the same leaning cross near the edge, the same warped church with its door hanging open just enough to breathe through. My knees nearly buckled. God, I'd walked uphill for 15 minutes without changing direction. The sun hadn't shifted. There was no way this was a mistake. And yet the church sat at the base of the hill like it had always belonged there. I backed away from the ridge, refusing to look at it again. My pulse thudded behind my eyes. Whatever this was, it was not natural. And it wasn't just in my head. Look, I trained for disorientation, handled it in caves, deserts, whiteout conditions. This was different. This felt engineered, like the land itself was rearranging movement. And a single step echoed faintly up the hill. It didn't need volume. No, the meaning was clear. Whatever was inside the church had moved farther into the nave. I turned and descended the opposite side of the rise. I stopped caring about trails or logic. I just needed distance from the repeating geometry. The brush thickened, branches raked my jacket, roots hooked my boots, and I forced my way through, deeper into the trees, until my legs burned and my throat scraped raw from cold, dry air. Eventually, I stopped sensing the clearing behind me. And that's when I saw it. A shape ahead. Dark, tall, human. About 30 feet out. I was too still to be an animal, too solid to be a shadow. I froze instantly, instinct taking over. The figure didn't turn, didn't shift. It just stood angled away from me, shoulders hunched, head bowed slightly forward, like it was listening. I tried to reason it out. A lost hiker maybe, a shepherd, someone collecting firewood. But my gut pulled hard in the opposite direction. This posture wasn't casual. It wasn't observant. It felt expectant. So I eased one step back, and the figure straightened. I stopped breathing and leaned behind a tree so slowly that my muscles screamed. I peeked again. It was gone. Leaves then rustled to my right, fast and controlled. Not running, just repositioning, like it had moved closer without making a sound. I retreated into the thicket, every nerve lit up. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my camera. I shoved branches aside, desperate to put obstacles between me and whatever had shifted position. After another minute, I stumbled into a tight pocket in the woods. It wasn't a clearing, just a collapse of undergrowth. I stopped there, my lungs heaving, trying to regain control. And then, something moved behind me. Oh, I didn't turn. I couldn't. My hands curled into fists, my vision narrowed. Cold swept through the air, and something brushed my ear. Not a voice, not sound, just breath shaped into meaning. Stop. The word wasn't spoken. It just formed in the space around me. Well, adrenaline snapped the hesitation, and I spun. Nothing. No figure, no movement, no sound. Then my foot snagged on something half buried in the soil, and I looked down. Wood. A splintered fragment of the church's doorframe. Fresh. The break was sharp, as if it had been torn free moments ago. I stood in a forest miles from where the church should have been, and pieces of it were here. All my breathing fell apart. I stumbled backward, and the forest broke open, and the clearing appeared again. And the church stood directly in front of me. Well, this time the door wasn't hanging open. It was wide, waiting. And that hit harder than anything else that day. Not because it moved, but because it didn't need to. It all felt intentional, anticipatory. The building had known I'd end up here again, no matter which direction I ran. I didn't step forward. I couldn't make my legs move at all. The clearing was quieter than before. Not empty, just suppressed. Sound seemed to die the moment it touched the air. My ears rang under the pressure. I backed up until my heels pressed into the grass at the clearing's edge, fighting the urge to beg for a reasonable explanation. Because there wasn't one. The fragments in the forest. The figure that moved without sound, the land folding back in on itself. No amount of logic could stretch far enough to cover what was happening. Still, instinct pushed me to brace. I raised the camera and zoomed in on the doorway, forcing my head back into work mode. Observe, record, don't react. When the image snapped into focus, something inside the nave resolved on the screen. Not a person, not movement. A shape, low to the floor, curled tight near the base of the altar. Well, it took a few seconds to understand what I was seeing. The stone slab had failed. Part 3. One corner had broken inward, collapsed under pressure, leaving a jagged hole that opened into whatever space lay beneath the church. Dust and shattered fragments ringed the break like fallout. My chest completely locked up. Something hadn't just shifted down there. No, something had been forcing its way up. The air moved. It wasn't a breeze, just a short, sharp pull like something drawing breath just inside the doorway. The hair along my neck stood straight up. The edges of the open door darkened, as if the interior was actively eating the sunlight instead of letting it in. I lowered my camera. "No," I whispered, to myself, to the place, to anything listening. Something answered, but not from the church, from the tree line behind me. One quiet word carried on a breath I couldn't feel. "Come." My body jerked hard enough to hurt. I spun, expecting to see the figure from the woods standing there, but again, there was nothing. Just trees, packed close and motionless, arranged like an audience holding its breath. I turned back to the church. Oh, my pulse hammered. There was nowhere left to run. Running hadn't worked. Navigation hadn't worked. Every attempt ended up back here. I had one option left. Go in there on my own terms. If there really was someone under the floor, trapped, injured, buried by a collapse, I couldn't walk away. Fear only gets so much authority before responsibility pushes back, and so I stepped forward. The moment my foot crossed the center of the clearing, the air changed again. Oh, the temperature dropped once more, but this time it didn't shock me. It pressed. The cold again felt intentional. It was testing me, the surface of my skin, but I kept moving. The doorway rose in front of me. When I placed my hand on the cracked wooden frame, it was warm. This wasn't ambient warmth. No, it was living, like heat was bleeding through from the other side. I leaned in. The air burned my lungs, not from the cold, but from dryness so sharp it felt synthetic. I swallowed and crossed the threshold. Dust drifted lazily in the slanted light from the broken windows, but the silence was gone. Yes, something was breathing, slow, ragged, human. It came from beneath the broken slab. I approached it like I would an unstable mineshaft, carefully, deliberately, ready to retreat. My boots scraped stone softly, the sound dying before it could echo. At the altar, the opening was fully visible now. The hole was about the size of a large pack, edges fractured inward, stone snapped like bone. I crouched down, and the breathing stopped. I stared down. There was no reflected light, no visible floor, just blackness, too deep and too absolute to be natural. I pulled my flashlight free, switched it on, and aimed the beam into the opening. I didn't illuminate anything. The light simply vanished, swallowed whole. Then the breathing resumed, but not below me, behind me. I spun so fast I nearly lost my balance and pitched backward into the hole. The beam tore across the nave. Empty pews, cracked icons, warped walls, the open door, but nothing else. The breathing didn't stop, it just moved. Not by crossing the room, but relocating. One moment behind me, next at my left shoulder, then near the doorway, then close, impossibly close. My flashlight flickered. I backed into the wall, my heart trying to claw out of my chest. The room seemed to dim, the corners losing definition, like the space itself was thinning. I tore through explanations. Yeah, acoustics, resonance, pressure shifts, but none of them accounted for the sound that moved without traveling. The breathing only deepened. It was wet, it was heavy, it was patient. I gripped my camera like it could save me, even knowing it couldn't. I scanned the room again, slower this time. Something moved at the edge of the broken slab now. A finger, human, pale, thin. It pressed against the jagged stone from below. For a split second, I believed someone was genuinely buried under the floor. Then a second finger surfaced beside the first, rising in perfect lockstep, gliding up without shifting a single pebble. A third followed, then a fourth. All four moved together with mechanical discipline, clearly part of a hand, yet not guided by one. They hooked over the fractured edge of the slab and locked into place, gripping the stone with a stillness that felt completely wrong. I stumbled backward until my chest slammed into the wall. The flashlight trembled in my grip, its beam skittering wildly across the nave. Well, this hand, or the thing pretending to be a hand, hauled itself higher, and in that instant, two truths hit me at once. First, there was no arm. Everything past the wrist vanished into the dark below, as if the void simply erased it. And second, the fingers weren't just human. They were familiar. My breath emptied out of me in a sharp, icy rush. Oh, the knuckles, the scars, the proportions. I knew them because they were mine. My hand was climbing out of the black gap beneath the church floor. The breathing in the nave thickened into a deep animal exhale. The fingers tightened on the stone now, the tendons flexing, and something began to pull itself upward. Something shaped like me. For a heartbeat, I couldn't even flee. Oh, shock nailed me in place as my fingers, clenched harder around the slab. Every detail matched. The thin white scar across the knuckle where I'd torn skin on a camera rig, the slightly crooked nail on my index finger from when I was a kid, God, even the faint hair along the back of the hand. It was perfect down to the smallest flaw, except it wasn't connected to anything I could see. The hand rose higher, wrist followed, pale and narrow. When it slid into the weak shaft of light, the surface shimmered, like the skin stretched too tight over something that wasn't bone. I lurched sideways and smashed into a pew. Dust exploded into the air. My flashlight beam ricocheted across the church. Useless. The breathing grew louder and deeper, as if the building itself was now inhaling from every corner at once. The hand now braced against the stone. Then a second hand appeared beside it, also mine. Oh, my pulse hammered so violently my vision smeared at the edges. The cracked slab groaned under the strain of whatever was forcing its way up. From below came the sound of slow, wet motion, muscle dragging across stone, flesh squeezing through a space that should never have allowed it. And I forced my legs to move. My boots slid on gravel and broken plaster. My shoulder clipped the wall as I shoved off, staggering toward the doorway. Every step felt heavy and muffled, like the air itself resisted me. The door was still open, unchanged, a thin frame of grey daylight. 5 steps behind me, something exhaled out of the hole. The sound was deep and resonant, vibrating through the floor hard enough to stir the dust around my feet. 3 steps. 2. Another noise followed, a thick, meaty impact, knees striking stone. Then fingers scraped across the floor, dragging forward, not fast, but deliberate. Across the threshold, into the clearing, my breath locked painfully in my chest. I wasn't alone. A figure stood near the far tree line, the same one I glimpsed earlier in the forest. It was tall and still, roughly human but warped in its proportions. Shoulders too narrow, spine bent just enough to be unsettling. Its head tilted. Wasn't watching, just listening. The distance between us was maybe 50 yards, but the posture told me everything. It was waiting. I backed toward the doorway. Every instinct screamed again to run the other way, anywhere but deeper into that clearing. But I remembered what had happened the last time I tried. The forest bent and warped. The paths lied. No matter where I went, I ended up back here. Well, behind me, inside the church, the thing continued pulling itself into the world. The sound of its hands sliding across stone scraped raw against my nerves. I was out of options. Either I faced the figure ahead of me, or I let my double finish crawling out behind me. So I chose the only option that felt even remotely survivable. I slipped back inside and flattened myself against the wall just as something massive scraped across the nave floor. Stone grated. When my flashlight finally stopped shaking, the beam settled on 2 pale hands locked around the broken slab. Yes, those hands that I knew. Then a face started to rise. My face, well, almost. Not warped, not grotesque, just incomplete, like a bad reconstruction built from memory and guesswork. The eyes formed first, peeling open so slowly, the lids stretching as they took shape. They were my eyes, same color, same set, but God, they were empty, focused on nothing, carrying an expression that didn't belong to any emotion I recognized. The rest followed in pieces. Cheekbones, sharp, a jaw that didn't quite line up, skin pulled tight and thin over bone. The mouth opened and closed in slow, deliberate motions as if testing how it worked. Daniel. My name came out wet and thick, not whispered, but spoken. Each syllable dragged through the air, shaped with effort, like it was learning language from scratch. I staggered backward toward the pews, almost tangling my feet. The thing hauled itself higher, shoulders clearing the edge of the slab now. Its spine straightened with a series of soft, intentional cracks, vertebrae snapping into place one by one. Then it froze. The breathing in the room cut off, and it was dead silence. Its head jerked, not toward me, but toward the open doorway behind me, like it felt something there. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the clearing, not just one set, several. Slow, heavy, perfectly timed. They came from different directions, closing in with calm precision that turned my stomach. Daylight outside had dimmed, as if bodies were blocking it. I turned toward the doorway. There were shapes there now, not just one, but three. Tall silhouettes, stiff and human-shaped, all nearly identical. They didn't advance, they just stood at the edge of the clearing, shoulder to shoulder, forming a line. Well, behind me, the creature inhaled sharply, and outside the shadows answered with a low, unified exhale. They were talking. Well, this realization iced my blood. This wasn't chance. I hadn't wandered into some ruin. I'd walked into something organized, something that had been waiting, something that knew me, or at least thought it did. The thing behind me planted a hand on the floor now, preparing to stand. Well, I didn't think, I just ran. Not toward the clearing, not toward the figures. I sprinted for the back of the nave, straight at a rotten side door hanging half free from its frame. I hit its shoulder first, and the wood split with a sharp crack and gave way, collapsing outward into a narrow passage I hadn't known existed. And I fell into the darkness beyond. Well, the breathing changed, all of it. The thing in the church, the figures outside, even the air itself, everything inhaled at once. Then the corridor behind me slammed shut without anything touching it. And ahead of me, the darkness thickened, waiting patiently and intentionally. For a few seconds I just stood there, blind and shaking, my pulse slamming so hard it felt like my ribs might fracture. Whatever had closed behind me had done it with enough force to shake dust loose from the stone. There was no latch, no footsteps, no movement, just impact and then stillness. I reached out, my fingertips brushing rough rock. Well, the corridor was tight, barely wider than my shoulders, but the cold was different here. It was stale, sealed, ancient. The kind of cold meant for places never meant to be found. My flashlight flickered then again, but held. Oh, the beam revealed a long, straight passage stretching ahead. The ceiling was low enough that I had to hunch down. The walls were uneven stone, hacked out crudely, maybe centuries ago. The thick cobwebs sagged overhead, untouched until now. I took one step forward. Behind me, the breathing continued, muted by the stone, but not gone. It pulsed faintly through the walls, like a heartbeat traveling through bone. I just kept moving. The corridor tightened even more, and the air grew colder still, but with every step I put more distance between myself and the thing that had been climbing out of the floor. Every sound hit hard down here. My boots on stone, my own breath rasping in my chest, the soft hiss of dust sliding when my shoulder brushed the wall. Somewhere ahead, water dripped. Slowly, hollow, a repeating sound. The only sign this place wasn't completely dead and dry. About 20 feet in, the corridor widened just enough for my light to spread. The beam caught marks carved into the stone. No, not carvings, not symbols, just scratches. Long parallel gouges ripped into the wall again and again, at the height of a person clawing to get out. Fingernails had done this. Oh, some grooves were dark with old blood, crusted deep into the stone. Others were newer. Too new. A shiver ran through me, deep and involuntary. Whatever had made these hadn't lived centuries ago. I stepped closer and studied the patterns. Some lines were frantic and wild, others were eerily neat and deliberate. Different hands, different times. My light skimmed the surface and picked up flecks of reddish-brown that hadn't fully dried. Oh, my stomach twisted. Someone had torn at this wall recently. Passage curved right, opening into a shallow chamber. Maybe storage at one point, maybe nothing at all. I edged inside, sweeping the beam low. Bones. Scattered pieces, no order to them. Small fragments I could almost explain away as animals, mixed with others that I couldn't. Something caught the light near the wall then. Fabric. I crouched and lifted it carefully. Bright orange, synthetic, modern. A shredded piece of hiking gear. I dropped it like it was burning me. My breath sped up, sharp and shallow, and I backed out of the chamber and forced myself forward, deeper into the corridor. Panic clawed at my throat, but stopping felt worse. The passage narrowed again now, swallowing all the light. My flashlight struggled more than before. Behind me the breathing had shifted. It was faint, distant, but still unmistakable. The sealed door groaned, the stone grinding against something solid. Not breaking, just testing, like weight leaning in, feeling for weakness. And so I picked up my pace. The floor sloped downward just enough to notice. The air dropped another degree, then another, until each breath stung my lungs. My fingers numbed around the flashlight. And then I heard it. Not breath, not steps, just a whisper. So soft I almost dismissed it as nerves. Daniel. My hand jerked. I nearly lost the light. That voice wasn't mine. It wasn't the thing from the slab either. This voice was human, thin, strained, and female. Part 4. Oh, my thoughts spiraled. Someone else had been in here, a hiker, an explorer, someone who hadn't made it out. Hello? I whispered, and then froze, the warning from the altar slamming back into me. Do not speak inside. Too late, the corridor reacted. The darkness ahead thickened, swallowing all sound. A low vibration then rolled through the stone under my boots, and dust slid down from the ceiling in a shallow, deliberate fall. Then the whisper came again, closer this time. Daniel, don't. That last word cracked like it broke apart in her throat. I swallowed, God, my mouth painfully dry. Who are you? I breathed, barely shaping the words. Nothing. Then a scuff behind me, close, 10 feet, maybe less. I spun, throwing the light back down the passage. It was empty, but the shadows looked heavier, piled on in places where they didn't belong. Another scuff, bare skin on stone, careful, afraid of being hurt. Help me, the voice whispered. God, my instincts tore in half. If someone really was trapped down here, I couldn't walk away, but every warning I had screamed that voices were being used on me now. The sound grew louder, and then it stopped. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, a hand slipped into the edge of my flashlight beam. Not from the floor, not from a hole, but from around the corner behind me. A human hand, thin and shaking, fingers raw and bleeding. Dirt packed under broken nails, one knuckle split open, swollen like it had been smashed against stone again and again. Well, my light shook violently. The hand clenched, scraped the wall once and left a fresh smear of dark red. Then a face leaned into view. A woman, her hair matted, her cheeks sunken, eyes wide and wild with terror. Oh, she looked straight at me, mouth open in silent pleading. My heart slammed hard enough to hurt now. I stepped toward her. Her expression changed, but not with relief. Fear. She stared past me into the darkness over my shoulder, and her mouth stretched wider, her throat working hard to... but no scream came out. Her eyes bulged in pure panic. She raised her hand and pointed. No, not at me, but behind me, and I turned. The corridor behind me filled with something that hadn't been there a moment ago. Tall and human-shaped, staring. Well, not the slab creature, not the clearing shadow, something entirely new, just inches away. I didn't have time to scream. My body moved first. I lurched sideways, smashing my shoulder into the stone wall hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. My flashlight jerked wildly, the beam slicing the corridor in chaotic arcs. For a second I saw it clearly. Not deformed, not monstrous, just a man. Tall and gaunt, bare feet grey with dust. His clothes hung in shreds, rotted into his skin, clinging to a body too thin to be alive. His face was blank. Well, not blank exactly, just empty, as if the features were arranged without a person behind them. But his eyes, though, they were wrong. Not hollow, not glowing, just wrong. Fixed, unblinking, unseeing, staring past me when I wasn't there, and yet he was inches from where my face had been. I scrambled back toward the chamber with the claw-marked walls, debris sliding under my boots. The woman, still peeking around the corner, her hollow-cheeked face taut with fear, mouthed a single word. Run. Well, I did not need convincing. The man didn't move as I backed away, head tilted slightly down, gaze fixed somewhere on the floor. One slow, hollow breath left him, a sound like wet cloth drawn through a bellows, not lungs. Then he stepped, just one soft, barefooted step, and the air itself seemed to compress around me. My back slammed into the wall, sending dust raining down. The woman had vanished now, no sound, no movement. The corridor swallowed it all, even my heartbeat. Then he took another step, patiently, as if following some rhythm only he could sense. My flashlight flickered once more, dimming, shadows thickening unnaturally at the edges of the corridor, crawling toward the center. Beneath my boots I felt vibration again, subtle but unmistakable, that same pulsing I'd felt under the church floor. I edged along the wall, moving toward the bend where the woman had been. Each motion felt like pushing through water. The man-thing followed slowly, his eyes unblinking, his gaze somehow fixed on me. He inhaled again, and the temperature dropped violently, my breath spilling in clouds. No, it wasn't cold. The corridor was pulling heat from me, from everything around it. I rounded the corner, expecting her to be waiting, but she wasn't. Dust again hung perfectly still, and her tracks had gone. It was as if she'd never existed. Well, that realization hit me harder than anything. This place erased the living. Behind me now, the man's footsteps shifted, irregular, as if his body was relearning how to move. Stone walls echoed each step, unnaturally sharp. But I didn't look back, I just ran. The corridor bent right, and then straightened, then sloped downward. My flashlight jittered, catching carvings I hadn't noticed. Deep scratches, repeated in a pattern I couldn't read. Not words, not art. Warnings. The deeper I went, the carvings became more frantic, overlapping, layered with panic. My body struck something soft then, and I stumbled. My flashlight swung down. A backpack. Not torn, not rotted in any way. Barely a year old. European hiking gear, a water bottle half full. Metal icy to the touch, as if chilled, not abandoned underground, though. My throat locked up. Oh, the missing hikers, the woman, anyone who had tried to get out of this place. Their gear hadn't been dragged here. It had been stripped from them, taken once they didn't need it anymore. My hand brushed against something beside the backpack, a small digital recorder. I picked it up, cracked clean through the casing, but the power light still flickered, weak and stubborn, when my thumb hovered over the play button. But before I could press it, a sound rolled through the passage. It wasn't footsteps or breathing. It was a voice. My voice. Daniel. It wasn't whispered, and it wasn't behind me. It came from deeper in the corridor ahead. My stomach twisted hard enough to make me gag. I swung the flashlight forward, and the beam cut 20 feet down the passage and stopped on a figure standing at the far end, half sunk in shadow. It was me. Same jacket, same height, same stance. But the face, still wrong in a different way. Not warped now, not unfinished. Perfect. Too perfect. Like someone had rebuilt me from memory with obsessive care. And the eyes moved. They locked onto me, sharp, aware, and alive. He lifted one hand. My hand. The motion was small and gentle and inviting. I backed up slowly, the recorder clenched in one hand, flashlight shaking in the other. The air thickened between us, pressing into my chest like invisible weight. And behind me, the gaunt man's uneven footsteps returned, dragging closer now. Ahead, my double glided forward without walking, without sound. I was running out of space. The flashlight caught a side passage, narrow, low, and almost invisible unless you were looking for somewhere to disappear. Well, I didn't think. I dove for it. Stone tore at my shoulders as I forced myself through. The opening was barely wide enough, but panic shoved me forward. The recorder clattered. I grabbed it, jammed it into my jacket, and kept crawling as jagged rock chewed into my palms. Behind me, two sounds overlapped. The heavy, broken steps of the gaunt man squeezing toward the bend, and my own voice, calm and certain, calling from the main corridor. You can't leave. My chest seized. The air thinned even more, and somewhere ahead, faint and distant, another voice whispered, Keep going. It didn't echo, it didn't travel, it felt placed directly inside my head. I didn't recognize it, not the woman's, not mine, but there was fear in it, raw and human, and it dragged me forward when my arms started to shake. The crawl space was suffocating, barely tall enough to slide through without grinding myself flat, and the air tasted like dust and rusted metal. My flashlight kept bouncing off the ceiling, blinding me, forcing me to crawl half blind. And behind me, movement filled the main corridor. Two presences, the gaunt man's dragging uneven steps, and my double smooth, frictionless approach, both converging on the hole I just vanished into. My heart slammed so hard it hurt, and the stone scraped my knees, my shoulders, my skin. But pain didn't matter. The cold spreading along my spine did, though. Keep going, the voice urged again, closer now and clearer. I shoved forward another foot, then another, and the passage angled down, and I nearly slid before catching myself on a jagged outcrop. The air dropped another degree, and the sounds behind me swelled. They'd reached the opening. The change was instant. The gaunt man drew in a long, wet breath that sucked warmth out of the stone itself. Rock crackled faintly, like frost was racing across it. And my double spoke. My voice again, soft and gentle, impossibly close. Daniel, come back. I couldn't look. The space was too tight for a human head to be anywhere near me, yet the voice was right at my back, close enough to feel. I can see you, it whispered. Something brushed the sole of my boots. Not fingers, not a hand, something colder, softer, like breath. I screamed without sound and lunged forward, panic detonating white-hot in my chest as I clawed my way deeper into the dark. I kicked blindly, my heels slamming into stone. No, not a face, not a body, just that cold breath again rolling up my leg like something exhaling against me. I shoved myself deeper into the tunnel as it narrowed, squeezing forward until there was barely room to breathe. My flashlight flickered. Oh, it was weak now and fading. I slammed it against the wall once and the beam flared, then collapsed into a dim, sickly cone. Ahead, the passage widened just enough to form a small hollow, no bigger than a closet. I dragged myself into it, my lungs burning. Broken stone covered the floor, and on the far wall, caught in the thin light, were fresh scratch marks. Not frantic, not random, just 2 words carved deep. Not you. The meaning settled heavy and cold in my gut. Someone had been here, someone had left that warning for whoever came next. Not you, not me, or not the thing wearing my face. Behind me, the gaunt man exhaled again, and frost crackled across the stone, the sound sharp and spreading, vibrating through the crawl space. My breath fogged thickly, and my fingers went numb. Then something whispered from inside the hollow, just inches from my ear. This way. I jerked hard enough to smash my shoulder into the rock. The voice came from the darkness to my right, from a slit I hadn't noticed, barely wide enough for an arm. But inside it I saw a glow, warm, steady, and real. Firelight. A lantern. Relief punched the air out of me. Something human, someone alive. I pressed my face toward the slit, the stone scraping my cheek raw. The glow wavered gently, shadows moving like water. Behind me, fingers slid into the crawl space, long, thin, grey with dust. The gaunt man was reaching for me. I shoved myself into the slit, and the stone tore at my jacket. Oh, my ribs screamed, and for a horrifying second I was stuck. Then the voice hissed again, urgent. Hurry! I blew all the air from my lungs and forced my body sideways. Oh, skin burned as I popped through, tumbling into a wider tunnel, an actual passage tall enough to crouch in. The lantern sat on the ground ahead, and beside it stood the woman, the same hollow-cheeked woman from the corridor. Oh, she was shaking uncontrollably. Her hair was matted, her lips split, and, well, she was real. She was solid, alive. She snatched up the lantern and jerked her head. No questions, she whispered. Just move. We ran. Footsteps crackled loud in the passage, and behind us the gaunt man's arm scraped wildly against the stone, trying to force its way through the slit. And then another sound joined it. My voice, so calm, so familiar. You shouldn't have left me. The woman flinched but didn't turn. Don't listen, she hissed. It uses whatever works. What is it? I gasped. Oh, she shook her head. Not now. The passage angled upward, and the air warmed just enough to feel like hope. The lantern flickered, shadows stretching and snapping across the walls. The stone under our feet felt older now, rougher, less intentional. We hit a fork. She didn't slow, yanking me to the right. The sounds behind us faded, swallowed by rock. After endless minutes of scrambling and climbing, the tunnel opened suddenly, and cold night air hit my face. We were outside. The cave mouth spilled onto a rocky slope beneath the forest canopy. Stars showed faintly through the branches, real stars, steady and grounding. The woman dropped to her knees and sobbed once into her hands, and then stood. We can't stop, she said. They come out after dark. My voice broke. Where are we? She lowered the lantern just enough to half light her face. Not far from where you entered, she whispered. It always brings you back. My stomach sank. But we can reach the road if we move fast, she said. If it hasn't changed again, that is. Something shifted in the trees below us. A tall shape, or maybe 2, or something else entirely. She grabbed my hand. Come on, run. And we did, into the dark Romanian forest together, terrified, breathing barely, but alive, while behind us, somewhere in the trees, the church exhaled.
Well, my dear friends, it's not often I get completely creeped out reading a story, but something about that one really did get to me. Had to stop a couple of times and go, "Ugh." So, it feels like it's begging for a sequel, doesn't it, that one? They just got out, and what's coming next? So, my dear author, please put me out of my misery. I don't care. I do care about the rest of you, but you know what I mean. Yes, I don't care. Just tell me where that's going after that one. Wow, what a fantastic story. Hope you enjoyed that one too. Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to share in the comment section below the video, and as ever, I will join in the conversation. Now, it's coming up to the end of the month, time when I do my Patreon special over on the Patreon channel. Thank you for all those who, support my work. Don't really want to do that for money, but it's nice for those of you who want to throw me $1 or $2. Much appreciated. Details in the video description. Anyway, that's a long one today. Hope you enjoyed it. I will be back again very, very soon with more like this. Till the next time, my dear friends, just remember, it's just a story and you sleep well, yeah? Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye. Welcome to Darktown. Population unknown, but decreasing with every passing story. Tonight, we take a journey together through this ostensibly normal, everyday American Midwest city. Let's see what we can find. The new horrors of Darktown. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. In our first story tonight, a college student's innocent game turns into a nightmare. What starts as a harmless scavenger hunt for incriminating items at a frat party leads to the discovery of a dark and disturbing secret. A shoebox filled with chilling Polaroids of victims. The protagonist's world spirals out of control when they come face to face with a twisted predator intent on silencing them forever. Forced to fight for survival, they take a life in self-defense, only to find themselves haunted by guilt and fear. Now they must grapple with the consequences of their actions. I stumbled across something at a party I shouldn't have. By Stone Score. I'm not much of a party person. When I was in high school, I pictured myself going to frat parties and hooking up with guys, or something along the lines of that. Anyways, that's obviously not what happened. I studied biomedical engineering at my university, which I'm not going to reveal the name of for privacy, and I'm much more of a homebody. However, me and my friend Derek occasionally go to parties and, well, we play a silly game. In this game we snoop around the frat, the sorority house, and try and find the most blackmail-worthy thing. Whoever finds the best, or worst, however you put it, well, whoever finds that item wins. This probably makes me sound like some snoopy, deranged psychopath. But, well, if it makes you feel any better, we usually return the evidence. But this time, I found something I regret finding. This time, we're at the Alpha Epsilon Pi House, at their annual welcoming party, or what Derek and I like to call the Let's Haze the Freshman party. I remember rummaging around a few rooms and finding a worn-down baby blanket. In another, I found a weird magazine. Not anything like Playboy. Something different. Let's just leave it at that. Anyways, I stopped in front of another door and read the Stay Out sign
plastered on the door. I shrugged and entered the room, or at least I tried. The door was locked, so I held my ear against the door. There were no intimate noises coming from the room. Now, usually if a room was locked, I wouldn't go in. If someone's door's locked, that obviously means they have something rather private in there, right? But curiosity got the best of me. A locked door and a stay-out sign. Well, I couldn't resist. This is where my handy lockpick, which was just a bent bobby pin, came in handy. After a few minutes of jiggling the bobby pin in the lock clicked. This room was surely a gold mine. I began searching around the room, and I'd found nothing that incriminating until I started opening the dresser drawers. At first, I found the usual: underwear, folded shirts, and jeans, until I opened the bottom right drawer. I found some zip ties, a pocket knife, and a Polaroid camera. But the thing that caught most of my attention was the white shoebox with no brand name on the box, ominously placed in the corner of the drawer. Suspicious. I immediately grinned. Whatever was in this box was surely going to win the contest. What was in that box made me regret coming to this party, and made me regret inventing this stupid game altogether. I vividly remember opening the box and finding Polaroid pictures of women and children. Their naked, ghostly figures were splayed across what looked like the grounds of the forest. The autumn leaves that covered the ground were bloodied, the bodies were bruised, and their faces, oh my God, their faces. Their faces were stuck in a look of horror, a look of helplessness. I immediately dropped the box out of my hands and yelped out. Everything looked so real. It was different from the movies. I thought, if I ever came across a body, I'd be somewhat unfazed by the gore, due to the amount of horror movies I'd watched. But on that damn day, I was proven wrong. I felt all the alcohol I'd previously consumed threatened to release itself all over the carpeted bedroom. I began to sweat, and tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I remember recovering from what I'd just seen in a few minutes. I needed to report this to the police. I tried to gather most of the Polaroids without getting a glimpse of them. I stuffed them in my pocket and proceeded to leave the magazine and baby blanket inside of the room, and I immediately shuffled down the stairs. I didn't bother to tell Derek where I was going. I could tell him what happened later. I stepped out of the room and left, not bothering to take a good look around. Someone immediately lashed their hand around my arm. I looked up. It was a guy around my age. He was tall, with deep-set eyes and curly black hair. He was wearing a blue Alpha Epsilon Pi shirt. I remember telling him that I probably wasn't his girlfriend or whoever he thought I was. That was until he lowered his head to my ear and huskily whispered, "You're a snoopy one, aren't you?" in my ear. I immediately remember thinking, "Run." I pulled my arm away with all the might I had. It was no use. I couldn't get out of his grasp. I immediately started yelping out excuses as I tried to wriggle out of his grip. But he looked unfazed. He started to pull me into his room. I screamed and shouted as loudly as I could, but the loud noises of the pop music and cheering blurred my screams for help. He threw me to the ground and quickly opened the bottom drawer and got a zip tie out. He proceeded to sit on top of my wriggling body and grab my left wrist. "This'll hurt less if you stay still," I remember him saying. He took my wrist and zip-tied it to the leg of his bed. He got up, and before leaving the room, he grinned and said, "I'll be back." After he closed the door, I immediately panicked. I'd seen tutorials on how to get out of a zip tie if both your hands are tied up, but I'd never seen one if your body was tied to something. I tried to squeeze my hands out of it, but it was no use. I looked around. The drawer which contained the pocket knife was still pulled out. If I could break the drawer out of the dresser, I could cut myself free. I immediately went to work, kicking the bottom of the drawer as hard as I could. One wheel of the dresser came unhinged, but the other hadn't yet, and he would come back at any minute. I sat up, making the plastic dig into my wrist. I scooted towards the drawer as far as I could and leaned forward. I hissed loudly. The zip tie was cutting off my circulation. I couldn't reach it. I sat back and rested for a moment, before taking one deep breath and scooching towards the drawer in one quick movement. I grabbed onto the edge of the drawer and pulled it towards me as hard as I could. The drawer made a loud popping noise as it came off of its hinges. I took the pocket knife out of the drawer and cut the zip tie. I sighed in relief. Now, it was my turn to escape. I couldn't go out the front door of his room. I couldn't risk getting caught again. I looked at his window and stepped toward it. I opened and looked out. We were on the second floor of the house, but there was a part of the first floor that stuck out under the room. I started to cut the window screen hastily. I was about to climb out when the door opened again. A slew of curse words flowed through my brain all at once. I didn't even bother to look back. I climbed out of the window as fast as I could. My foot planted itself on the very top of the mini roof, or whatever you'd call it. Once I got both of my feet planted on the roof, I tried to climb down. The goddamn rain soiled my plans, and I slipped down the roof, falling onto the ground. My head was pounding at this point, and you can just guess who exited the building via the front door. I ran as fast as my body could manage, with my head pounding and my legs aching as much as they did. I ran into the wooded area, and my mind immediately went to the pictures I'd found just minutes before. Was I going to end up just like those poor people in those photos? The loud footsteps behind me only grew closer, and before I knew it, I'd been tackled to the ground. The man's curly hair hung in his face as he grinned widely. Was I going to be his next kill? He pressed his fingers into my neck. I don't usually strangle people, but I guess you're a good exception, he commented, rather nonchalantly. I quickly lifted my leg up and kicked him in the crotch. He hissed, and his grip loosened. This was my chance. I wriggled him off of me and stood up, kicking him as hard as I could in his sides. He yelped in pain as I got on top of him and pressed my fingers to his neck just as he'd done. Nothing was on my mind except the fact that I needed to press harder. I needed to kill this man. And I did. I screamed when I noticed he wasn't breathing anymore. I shook him. No, this couldn't be. I didn't kill him, did I? I started to weep when I noticed I had actually killed him for good. I didn't know what to do. So, I called Derek. He picked me up, along with the body. He freaked out, and he didn't stop when I told him the full story of what happened. What we ended up doing, after a lot of panicking, was driving to Home Depot and getting a cinder block along with some rope. The next day, Saturday, we drove to a lake a few hours away. In the wee hours of the morning, when no one would be awake, we tied the cinder block to the guy's ankles and dropped him into the lake. And that's the end. No one has found the body yet. A part of me doubts they ever will. Have the fish already eaten him up? And, well, if they did, and found me guilty, would my crimes be justified? Probably not. I live in constant paranoia because of this. My hands are shaking as I type. I don't have anything else to say at this point. Thank you for reading my story, I guess.
In our next tale of terror, Alex, a troubled teenager with a volatile home life, seeks refuge at his friend Red's house after being kicked out by his abusive alcoholic father. Red's house is a familiar escape for Alex, where a group of misfits gathers to numb their problems with questionable substances. When Red introduces a new synthetic drug called C9, marketed as cheap and potent, Alex and the others are lured into trying it, despite the underlying tension within the group. What follows is a dangerous spiral into the unknown, where choices made in desperation lead to unexpected consequences. Cloud 9 by the Fear Junkie.
I don't give a damn where you go. Just get the hell out. A powerful voice boomed from the doorway, and several random objects flew through the air, missing Alex as he stormed off down the driveway. Father had always been a raging alcoholic, and had a habit of throwing tantrums, but this one was the worst yet. Alex had failed history 3 grading periods in a row, breaking his promise to at least pass his classes. It's not my fault. Mr. Thomas is the most boring and confusing teacher ever, Alex muttered under his breath as he pulled on his hood, fighting off the chill of the mid-November air. Pulling out his phone, the steaming teen dialed up his good friend, Red. Yo, dude, I need a place to crash for the weekend. My parents kicked me out again. Alex sighed into the phone. No problem, bro. I've got you covered, his friend replied on the other end. Just come on over to my place. My mom's gone on another week-long bender, so she won't be home to care. Alex could always rely on Red, ever since they'd been 9 years old. Coming from similarly broken homes, Red and Alex had a mutual understanding of each other, finding comfort in each other's company, along with many mind-altering substances that they could get their hands on. By the time Alex arrived at Red's beaten-up shack of a house, Red had already invited other guests. Upon opening the door, Alex saw who'd shown up. Before him, Red, the short and lanky ginger, with skin as pale as paper, smiling widely, showing off the gaps in his teeth from one too many fistfights. Inside the house, Alex spotted Eric, a massive, stout, 18-year-old who was like the older brother of the whole group. His beard had grown in when he was 12, so Eric had always looked like a huge mountain of a man. Lastly, but certainly not least, there was Patricia, or Paddy, as Alex called her. Paddy was Eric's little sister, 2 years younger, and while he didn't enjoy what she did in her spare time, he did want to keep her safe, since she had a bad habit of catching the attention of thug types. While younger than the rest of the group, Paddy stood a good 6 inches taller than Alex, but she never wasted time rubbing that in his face. Hey, shorty. Glad you could make it to the party. Red's got some good shit for us tonight, chimed Paddy as she sat on the stained couch, sipping from a flask. Smiling softly, Alex stepped in as Red closed the door behind him. The lady speaks the truth, my good man. I have procured a new brand of substance from yonder pipe shop. Behold. Red held out several packets, all labeled the same. C9. Cotton candy clouds. Just read the packaging. Depicts what would look to be clouds made of cotton candy, as the name suggests. C9. What on earth is that? Alex inquired, just as Paddy draped her arms over his shoulders. C9 is the newest and hottest thing on the block, Daddy-O. One puff of this and you'll be as high as the peak of Mount Everest, Red replies, while giving Alex the finger guns, changing his mannerisms as per usual. It's a synthetic, supposed to mimic the effects of pot, but it's crazy cheap, Patty added, and Red nodded in agreement, tossing the packages to Eric, who sat in the oversized recliner, which still looked small compared to him. Eric, my man, do me the honors and stuff those pipes for me, Red chimed, as he struck an overly dramatic pose. Eric grimaced, signing to Red that he was tired of him bringing in new things around his sister. Chill, bro. It's totally safe. It wouldn't be legal if it was dangerous, right? Patty retorted, with a chuckle, drawing a sigh of defeat from Eric. He just couldn't say no to his little sister. While Eric started stuffing the pipes with what looked like sawdust, Patty pulled Alex to the couch and pushed him down, sitting next to him, but clutching his arm. Tonight, my friends, we explore new territories, announced the overly zealous Red, as he took a stuffed pipe, wasting no time in lighting it up and puffing hard. The foul stench of burnt cotton candy filled the air, making Alex's nose scrunch up. Receiving his own, Alex placed the pipe in his mouth, and Patty lit it for him, and he inhaled. Burning smoke filled his lungs, scorching everything it touched all the way down, eliciting violent coughs from Alex. Drinking water to expel the horrendous taste from his mouth, Alex watched as Patty and Eric joined in, taking puffs of their own. For several minutes, the group felt nothing, taking repeated puffs on the pipes in hopes of speeding up the process. Red, I thought you said this was good shit, Alex scoffed, dumping out the ashes from his chili pepper-shaped pipe. Shit, man. I was told this was the hottest shit in town right now. Maybe we just can't feel it since. Alex looked up at Red, expecting him to finish his sentence. But all Alex could see on his friend's face was nothing. It wasn't that he was expressionless, just that, well, he had no face. Blinking rapidly, Alex realized Red still had facial features, but they were blurred out, as if he was in one of those police shows where witnesses wanted to keep their identities concealed. Alex couldn't remember Red's face now for the life of him. Looking around, he realized that the same thing was happening with Patty and Eric. A numbness overtook Alex. He neither felt nor heard anything, aside from a steady and rapid thumping from his chest, like a muffled drum. Soon after, his vision started to fade to blackness. It was a warm and comforting darkness, like when one falls asleep. But the tranquil feeling of security was quickly lost, as Alex realized he was back home, staring into the scarred door to the hallway closet. A sturdy-looking board leaned against the doorframe, looking to fit in metal hooks screwed into the wall on either side of the door. Dread overtook the boy, as he felt an imposing force behind him, pushing him backwards towards the slowly opening closet. I told you, boy. You mouth off to me again, and I'd put you in the hole. Consider yourself lucky. A deep, rumbling voice bellowed from the force pushing him through the doorway. Panic set in as he struggled against the force, but much like an animal fighting against the current of a river, his efforts were in vain. Behind him, the door swung shut, and the loud thud of wood hitting metal rang out, casting Alex into silence and darkness. Pounding on the door, Alex cried out in fear, begging for freedom, but the old-world wooden door held fast, not relenting to the boy's feeble attempts to break it down. Alex screamed until his voice went hoarse, and then all he could produce was a pathetic squeak. Within the closet, which acted as Alex's prison, there was no sign of light. A darkness as thick as pitch enveloped the terrified boy. Hours upon hours of solitude in the endless void of shadow had taken its toll on him, scrambling his sense of time and reality. Just as countless memories of days spent in the prison of the closet flooded Alex's mind, suddenly, the imposing, claustrophobic grip on him was gone. Quickly, he got to his feet, scanning his surroundings. Much like in the closet, Alex stood in a smothering darkness, that is, until he turned to see the azure glow of a fountain. An oddly out-of-place fixture in the dark, it stood tall and proud. Many gargoyles spewed glowing water from their mouths, but made no splashing of water on water. Atop the granite fountain stood a figure, human in shape, but completely void of any features. No hair, clothes, nose, ears, not even any eyes. Just a wide grin, a row of bleached and jagged teeth splitting open the tightly pulled onyx-colored skin on the face. An expression far too wide to be anywhere near human. In the faint glow of the luminous water, Alex could see the skin of the being's forehead split open with a sickening tear. Putrid grey fluid leaking from the newly formed wound. Splitting further open, the break in skin revealed an inhumanly large eyeball, the size of a baseball, glaring back at Alex. Before any words could be spoken, the solid footing under Alex gave way, plunging him into murky water, forcing him to hold his breath. Coldness gripped Alex as he heard faint voices, though he couldn't make out what was said. Somehow, the voices seemed oddly familiar. Several hands pushed against his face and chest, growing more frantic as time went on. Alex couldn't move to fend off the groping hands. They felt like they were gripping every part of him. A burning sensation grew in his chest as his lungs ached for air. Voices grew frantic and jumbled, like a crowd of people yelling over each other. Suddenly, the hands grabbed him all over, and Alex felt them pulling him through the water quickly. An overpowering force slammed him on his back at the bottom of whatever body of water he was getting dragged through. As quickly as it all began, the water vanished, and Alex took in a breath of stale, musty air. Looking up, he saw ceiling tiles and felt the cold, hard tile of the school hall floor. Many students were muttering to each other in tongues Alex had never heard before. Having pulled himself to his feet, he swung his head around to see all the students staring at him, their gazes piercing straight through him. The stares surrounded Alex. He could feel himself getting impaled by judgment as the muttering rose in volume. Through the cacophony of noise, Alex could make out one word. Face. His hands immediately shot up to his face, and he felt something like a slime, with bits of something floating in the ooze. With haste, Alex bolted to the restroom, which was, luckily, unoccupied, and once inside, he flipped on the light. Horror struck Alex as he finally saw what all the other students were talking about. His face was melting, much like a candle in front of a blowtorch. His skin turned a sickly grey and began to peel off his face. His nose dangled from a thread of muscle as a rancid odor filled his open nasal cavity. Though Alex watched in horror, he felt no pain. The decaying flesh of his face felt alien and wrong. Fingers dug into flesh and tore it away in a frenzy. Globs of decaying skin and muscle covered the porcelain sink in a grey fluid. His heart pounded painfully hard as he frantically clawed at his face, the same grey fluid oozing from between the muscle fibers and dripping onto the sink. Vision in his left eye faded as the eyeball melted into a jelly, slipping from its socket and into the sink. Nails scraped against bone as the last remaining shreds of flesh melted away. Using his index finger, Alex pried out his right eye, and, with an audible pop, the eyeball was ejected from its home and fell down the drain. Alex's vision followed the eyeball down the drain into complete darkness. Then, once again, Alex stood before the fountain. The ominous figure was still standing motionless atop it. His hands frantically groped his face as an inspection, finding his features to be untouched, as normal as usual. Returning his gaze to the ebony figure, Alex saw that several more wounds had torn their way through this being's skin, revealing piercing eyes all over the body. From the head to the legs, no part of the figure's body was left untouched by the multiplying eye. A hole opened up under Alex, and he fell, landing hard on his back in a heap. Dazed, Alex looked around him and felt something familiar. Grain. All around him. Grain. Realization hit him, and Alex knew he was inside a grain silo. One summer, when he was 6, he had played with his cousins on his uncle's farm. While playing, Alex had climbed on top of the silo, trying to hide from his cousin by jumping into the grain. What he hadn't realized was that grain can act like quicksand, and it engulfed him rapidly. Alex kicked and screamed as he sunk deeper into the dry grain. He heard his cousin's voice calling to him from atop of the silo. Each kernel of grain put a tiny amount of pressure on Alex, each trying to push him down. Altogether, they forced the boy deeper. Having flailed his arms, Alex tried as hard as he could to free himself from the impending prison, only succeeding in burying himself deeper. Taking a final breath, Alex's head plunged underneath the grain. Now the grain faded away to soil, and Alex's eyes snapped open, only for him to be blinded by freshly disturbed dirt. Clarity hit him as he clamped his eyes shut, trying to wipe his eyes, but his hands were held in place by the earth around him. His lungs began to burn for air. Each attempt to draw in breath was met with more dirt. A chorus of voices screamed at him to escape, to go up. With burning muscles, Alex fought to lift his arms. Though it took all his effort, he managed to shift through the loose soil. Next came his legs, the dirt proving a formidable foe to overcome. Slowly worming his way up, Alex could feel the surface just out of reach. And then, once again, Alex stood before the fountain, but with eyes of various sizes surrounding him on all sides in the darkness. The fountain ran grey with the same putrid fluid pouring from the black figure that was now perched atop the highest gargoyle. All the statues in the fountain turned their heads in unison and stared directly at Alex, all yelling in alien tongues. A deafening cacophony of screams barreled into Alex, forcing him to clamp his hands over his ears. The floating eyes glowed red with hatred as the grin on the black figure grew wider and wider, splitting what remained of its face until the bottom jaw flopped open, revealing thousands of rows of undulating, razor-sharp fangs extending all the way down the abyss that was its throat. Alex sat up in bed and screamed, flailing his arms in a cold sweat. "Whoa, come down there, buddy." A familiar voice sounded, and a door opened. Alex stopped and saw that he was in Red's room, lying in his bed. Turning, Alex saw that his best friend was standing at the door with a steaming bowl of what Alex presumed to be soup. "You all right, buddy?" Red inquired, walking over to Alex and sitting on the bed. You scared the shit out of all of us, man. You completely passed out." Alex rubbed his eyes as the haze started to lift from his mind. He suddenly recalled that the night before he and his friends had tried that new C9 crap. "Bro, I think you need to sober up a while. That fucked you up. You've been out for 2 days," Red added, as he looked deep into Alex's eyes, checking to make sure his friend was all right. A rumbling sound came from Alex's stomach, malnutrition setting in. "Yeah, I knew you'd be hungry by the time you woke up, so, I made you some soup," Red said with a smile as he handed Alex the bowl. A wave of relief swept over Alex as he took everything in. He was out of that hell, done with that trip. Maybe he should take Red's advice and sober up for a while. Could do him some good. Alex had thought this as he brought the spoon into his mouth, then immediately spat it out. Dirt. Alex was eating dirt. The once mouth-watering scent of soup was replaced with the musty scent of soil. Alex blinked, and he was instantly back in the darkness, gasping for air only for his nostrils to be filled with more loose soil. He had never left his hole in the ground. He'd imagined all of the events in his friend's room. His lungs burned for air, and his muscles ached from lack of oxygen. Panic set in as Alex flailed in the dirt, digging his way up once more as his mind swam. Visions of moments flashed before his eyes. The long nights spent in the hole, the beatings his father never spared him from, the apathetic looks his mother gave him, that time he sewed his pants in class by accident, walking down dark alleyways at night with a homeless man following him. These and many more flooded Alex's mind as he fought for survival. He felt the cold evening air on his hand as he broke to the surface, gripping stable ground as he pulled with all his might. His muscles began to fail him, deprived of oxygen and overtaxed from the effort. All thoughts slowed to a crawl as a biting cold slowly enveloped Alex, drawing him deeper into a sleep he couldn't fight anymore. The sound of birds chirping stirred Alex awake. His eyes fluttered open as golden sunlight poured through his window and into his room. Sitting up quickly, Alex felt around, feeling the clean linens of his bed. Was he out? For good? Was this yet another dream, just a figment of his imagination? Well, it felt real enough though, so that was good enough for now. Alex spent the next half hour collecting his thoughts, remembering the events of the previous night in vague detail. He honestly couldn't tell whether or not what he went through was an hallucination or a dream. After dressing himself and grabbing his phone, Alex noticed he had a message from Red. "Hey, hope you made it home all right. Gee, last night was nuts, bro. Be sure to come round and grab your hat." With a sigh, Alex set out towards Red's house once again. Arriving at the shack and having knocked on the door, Alex realized that Red wasn't home. Using the spare key under a rock near the door, Alex let himself in. Man, the place was trashed, even more so than usual. Broken glass and candy wrappers laid scattered all over the floor, painting an odd picture of what had occurred the night before. Spotting his hat on the couch, Alex walked over and picked it up. And then he stopped, frozen in place. Slowly turning his head, Alex looked out the back sliding glass door, noticing a large hole in the backyard, complete with scattered and freshly dug dirt. Alex's heart sank. That hole hadn't been there the day before.
In our third eerie Darktown tale, a young novelist moves into their first home in the countryside, excited by the peaceful isolation and natural beauty. Along with their loyal dog, Shadow, they enjoy an idyllic summer. But as autumn approaches, strange events begin to unfold. Shadow starts acting aggressively toward the darkness beyond the backyard light, growling at something unseen. At first, our protagonist dismisses it as a typical animal behavior, but night after night the unsettling pattern continues. When a new moon casts the property into deeper darkness, both the protagonist and Shadow sense something lurking just beyond the light, watching them. Or What began as an innocent move into a dream home slowly turns into a creeping nightmare. First the door, then the light, by Mr. Charms 505.
Always shut the outer door before you turn the outside light off. That was the only thing written on the little post-it note left for me by the previous homeowner. I didn't think much of it at the time I discovered it. I was busy moving into my first home, had tons of boxes I still needed to move from the U-Haul into the house, and I couldn't be bothered to keep track of a scribbled-on piece of paper left on the kitchen counter. The last few months before the move had been a bit of a whirlwind for me. At 26, I'd just published my first novel. It was actually selling pretty well. With money coming into my bank account in large amounts, I decided that it was time to move out of my one-bedroom apartment and find myself an actual house. I also decided it was time to move out of the overcrowded city and give myself some space to breathe. So, I began to search for some property out in the country. It took a little while, but I eventually found the house. Not too big, not too small. It was just off a county road that led deep into farmlands. There were neighbours, but their driveways were about a 5-minute walk from mine. Not too far, but not too close either. The price of the place was very reasonable as well, far lower than what I'd expected. This raised some suspicions in my mind, but after numerous inspections and walkthroughs turned up nothing wrong with not only the house but the property in general, I just thought I'd gotten extremely lucky and bought the place soon after the last walkthrough. Now, the really great thing about the house was that even though it was somewhat removed from civilization, it still had plenty of decent creature comforts. It was a newer house, so electricity and plumbing weren't a problem. There is decent cell service, and the previous owners did some renovations to give the place a more rustic look. There are woods surrounding my house, but the tree line is a fair distance off, so I can observe nature without worrying that a storm will have nature come crashing through my windows. There are wild animals like coyotes and bears nearby, but I picked up a Remington 870 shotgun before I moved, and my wonderful companion Shadow, an almost pure black border collie, has always let me know when there are visitors, both welcome and not, to our abode. Shadow took to our new home like a fish to water. She loved to sniff around at all the new smells of the outdoors, chase squirrels, and explore with me through the many pines, oaks, and ashes that littered the woods behind us. We moved in during May, and the summer was an absolutely fantastic one. Friends came over, barbecues were had, many nights were spent stargazing. But then fall came. The trees changed colours, the warmth drained from the air, and the troubles began to appear. Shadow is very routine-oriented. Always has to have breakfast at a certain time, a walk at a certain time, and has to be let outside to do her business at a certain time. It was one night in early September that I noticed something weird that she was doing. During the summer, when she was let out into the backyard at night, she would wander past where the back porch light would illuminate, nose to the ground. I never had a problem with this because she always came back when I called. And yet, one night, I noticed that when she was let out, she wandered to the edge of the illumination and came to an abrupt stop. I couldn't see too clearly, but I did see her posture shift into one of aggression. Through the chirps of crickets and other noises of night creatures, I heard a low growl from her. This was surprising to me, as Shadow wasn't very aggressive. Sure, she'd bark whenever someone came to the door, but I'd never heard her growl at anything before. So naturally, when I heard her growl at the darkness beyond my backyard light, red flags immediately popped up in my mind. I keep a high-powered flashlight next to my back door, so I grabbed it and shone it out into the blackness of my backyard. Nothing abnormal was highlighted in the massive beam of illumination that came from my flashlight. Just grass, weeds, and the first line of trees that was the gateway into the forest beyond. I swerved the beam of light back and forth a few times, but still saw nothing out of the ordinary. In the minute I spent trying to see what it was that freaked my dog out, She'd done her business and was now coming back inside the house, seemingly relaxed again. I shrugged the whole thing off as a dog being a dog, closed my back door, and continued my night as normal. The next night, however, the strange ritual was performed again. Shadow went outside, went to the edge of the light, stopped suddenly, and began to growl at the night that surrounded her. Once again, warning bells went off in my head, and I grabbed the flashlight again. Scanning the surrounding area had the same results as the previous night. But seeing Shadow relax again within a minute and do her business, well, I thought it was just an animal scent from far away that Shadow could smell, but I couldn't. These nightly incidents did not stop, however, and after a week, I figured it was something Shadow had just started doing. I didn't pay it any mind whatsoever. Well, that came to an end on a night that a new moon was in place. The backyard was darker than usual, and the only light at all came from my back porch light. I let Shadow out, but she only went a few feet out of the door before she stopped in her tracks, ears perked and tail standing straight up. She lowered her head and began to growl lowly, her hackles standing on end. This night, I didn't have to wonder what was going on. My animal instincts were screaming at me that something was out there in the dark, and it was not friendly at all. Worst of all, I had the feeling that whatever creature lurked about in the abyss, it was watching us. Only a few seconds after I'd opened the door, I reached over and grabbed my flashlight, turning it on quickly and wildly swinging the beam of light through the murk. As the light crossed the tree line, I distinctly heard the sound of something scampering back into the woods before my light could reveal what it was. With the absence of whatever that thing was, my lizard brain calmed down, and I even saw Shadow ease up a bit, though she still went to the bathroom near the house and wasted no time coming back inside. I, however, stood still in the doorway, waiting to see if I could hear any sign of our unwelcome visitor coming back. After a few minutes of crickets chirping, nightbirds calling, and my nerves still being relaxed, I closed the door, shut off the light, and went to bed. Things were calm for the next 2 weeks. Shadow didn't get tense anymore going outside at night, and I was assured our troubles with whatever was out there were over. I even began to hang out in the backyard at night, with the back porch light off, so I could look up at the stars without any light pollution. That came to an abrupt end one cloudy, cold October night. Even though it was cloudy enough to cover both the moon and the stars, I was stubborn and decided to stick it out and wait for the clouds to dissipate. I was sitting in my stargazing chair, one of those chairs you can lie back on and it stretches out so you can actually lie back and stare straight up, and had been listening to a lo-fi channel on YouTube. I didn't have the most comfortable headphones in, so after a while, I decided to give my ears a break and took them off. Silence greeted me, utter and complete. None of the nighttime noises I'd gotten used to were in the air, only the sound of me breathing and my own heart beating. In moments, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked into gear. I knew that nature shouldn't be this quiet, and the instinctual terror I'd felt weeks ago came rushing back into me with double the intensity. I scrambled out of my chair, disconnecting my headphones from my phone in my graceless tumble backwards, and was booking it for my back door. As I ran, I didn't hear any footfalls from behind me, yet I did manage to catch the distinct crunch of someone stepping on and crushing my headphones, assuring me that there was indeed something behind me in the dark, and it was coming after me. I got to my back door, thanking God I hadn't locked it, opened it, and stepped inside. I tried to turn on the back porch light, my hands fumbling in fear for a moment before I got it. In that moment, I knew the light had turned on, and before I had a chance to turn around, I heard something from behind me. It was the sharp rustling of grass and of earth being dug up. I turned around, grasping at the flashlight hanging beside me while trying to spot what had made the noise. Nothing was in the ring of light cast by my back porch light, and when I got the flashlight up and shone it around the yard, it revealed that nothing was there. As I stood in the doorway, scanning the night, Shadow came up beside me. She already had her hackles raised and began growling into the night right beside me. I knew something was up, and so I decided to call out. "Is anyone there?" I called into the night, not really expecting an answer. "Seriously, if someone's out there, I'm armed and you're freaking me out. I don't want to shoot anyone, but if you keep messing with me, I won't hesitate." Silence was my reply, with the slow ambience of crickets and nighttime animals returning at last. Shadow was much more relaxed as well, so I began to think I just scared myself over nothing. But then my flashlight beam came across something odd on the ground. Right outside of the edge of light created by my porch light, I noticed upturned grass and dirt, a large patch of it. I stared at it in confusion for a moment, wondering what it was, when a memory from childhood popped into my head. I used to play soccer, and sometimes when you were running fast and had to stop quickly, you'd dig your cleats into the grass, tearing up the field and bringing you to a halt. The patch in my backyard looked exactly like that, but I couldn't make myself believe someone had been silently chasing me in cleats. No, whatever had made that had to have been some animal, but animals don't wear shoes with cleats, so the closest thing to cleats some animal might have would be claws. The next day, I called up my local fish and wildlife agency. I described to them the incident and asked them what they thought it could have been. They told me it might have been a bobcat, but I insisted that it couldn't have been. I wouldn't want to tussle with a bobcat, but I highly doubt one could have invoked the primal fear that I'd felt. I asked if there was a potential for the creature being a mountain lion, but I was told we lived too far south for them. With some persistence, I managed to get them to agree that they would send an agent out near my area to investigate. Later that night, when it was time for Shadow to go outside, I grabbed my shotgun and loaded it. Shadow seemed a bit more at ease when she went outside, but I wasn't going to take any chances, and I stood in the doorway with a slug in the chamber, waiting for something to rear its ugly head out of the darkness. Nothing came of it, but throughout the entire time, I felt like I was being observed by something out in the night. Things went on like this for a few days, until one Saturday when I was doing a little gardening next to the side of my house, and I began to dig up the dirt underneath my kitchen window. I stopped when I saw strange impressions in the ground. Looking closer, I saw that they were a faint imprint of track, and following them, I found they circled around my entire home, always stopping at one of the windows, and then picking up again to go to the next window. My blood ran cold at this discovery. Not only were these tracks in no way human, as it didn't look like any shoe print I'd seen before, but whatever was making these seemed to have been profiling my home, and was smart enough to be going to my windows to check for a way in. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, and I did not like that. I decided to wait one night to see if I could catch whatever was doing this. That night, we did the same usual routine, but I acted calmly, like nothing was bothering me. When Shadow came back inside, I shut the door and flipped off the back porch light as usual. But instead of getting ready for bed, I shut off all the house lights, grabbed my shotgun, and waited by the back door. I spent a long time sitting in the dark by the back door, trying to remain calm through my anticipation of whatever was going to come skulking out of the blackness. Hours went by, and I was eventually becoming tired and had difficulty keeping my eyes open. The silence outside and the slow, steady rhythm of my kitchen clock ticking away was almost enough to put me under. Suddenly, the realization hit me, and my eyes shot wide open. It was dead quiet outside. No usual nighttime sounds, just like that night a few weeks back. I placed my ear against the door and tried to listen through it. For the first minute or two, I couldn't hear anything. My ears must have gotten used to the silence, however, as shortly after, I began to faintly pick up the sound of grass being crushed underfoot. It seemed to be coming from the left side of my house and coming closer to the door. It softly stopped, and as I strained to listen, a new sound cut through the darkened home. Light tapping, coming from my kitchen window not 6 feet away from my sitting form. The breath froze in my lungs. Something was at my kitchen window, tapping away quietly. I tried to crane my neck to see if I could see what was causing the sound, but from where I was sitting, I didn't have a good angle. I slowly began to shift my position to get a better look. With my shotgun, which I'd forgotten was leaned up against the doorframe next to me, decided it had had enough standing up and chose right then and there to clatter loudly to the ground next to me. The tapping at the window immediately stopped, and I cursed myself and the firearm internally for being in the situation I was in now. I pressed my ear to the door again, but heard no noises coming from outside. I stayed like this for a good minute or so, trying my hardest to hear any noise that originated past the door. An idea formed in my head. Not a good one, but I didn't know what else to do at the time. Timidly, but loud enough for those close by to hear, I called out, "Hello." I waited with bated breath for a few seconds, but nothing happened. I waited apprehensively for a few more, and still there were no sounds. I let out a sigh, thinking nothing was there and maybe I'd hallucinated the taps on the windows. Suddenly, an explosive burst of sound came from the other side of the door. I distinctively heard the sound of clawed feet running up my back porch steps, and only had a second to prepare when something crashed heavily into my back door. The next couple of moments were pure chaos. Shadow was awoken and started barking from somewhere in the house. I was letting loose a stream of curses and cries of terror, and whatever was on the other side of the door began pounding on it. Through its banging, I distinctly remember hearing whatever was on the other side making a guttural growl that seemed to be a cross between a snake's hiss and a cat's aggressive yowl. In my panic, I grabbed my shotgun and got to my feet, pointing the gun at the door and crying out, "Stop it! Go away! Leave us alone!" Now, my old back door used to have a pane of glass about eye level to me, which is about 6 feet tall. As I stood there, quivering with fear, gun at the ready, a pair of eyes came into view from the other side of the glass. They were larger than any humans, and they were bright yellow, with slit-like pupils you see in a snake's eyes. When they caught sight of me, the banging stopped, and I could hear this thing's labored breathing. It was panting while looking at me, and some old animalistic instinct deep inside me told me those eyes were the eyes of a predator, and it was looking hungrily at its prey. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen with fear. Part of me wanted to shoot at the thing, but I didn't want to damage the only barrier that stood between this creature and me. I then realized Shadow's barking was a lot louder, and looking to my side, I saw she stood next to me, barking, growling, and baring her teeth at the thing behind the door. Looking back up, I saw the yellow eyes shift downward to look at Shadow, and the guttural growl again came through the door. "Oh, no, you don't," I cried, anger suddenly flowing through my veins. "You keep your freaking eyes off of my dog." No way was I going to let this thing that dragged itself from the darkened woods lay one clawed finger on my fur baby. I rushed to the door, turning on the porch light to get a better shot before going for the door lock with my other free hand, steeling myself to blast the bastard and fight to the death to keep my baby girl safe. It turns out I didn't have to. For the moment the porch light turned on, the eyes disappeared from the pane of glass, and I heard the most tormented and fearful howl I've ever heard from man or beast. I could hear the scraping of claws against my wooden deck, as whatever hellspawn that stood at the threshold of my house scrambled to get out of the light and run back to the safety of dark night. As I got the door open, I saw the shape of something large and tall, easily breaching 8 feet on 2 long, gaunt legs, tearing past the perimeter of light created by the back porch light, back into the pitch blackness of the surrounding forest. I didn't sleep that night, instead choosing to drink coffee with my shotgun in my hand until the sun rose. When I went to survey the damage in the morning light, I grimaced at the sight. My deck had massive, deep, gouged scratch marks in the wood. My back door had a large crack in it from where the thing had slammed into it, and a strip of my yard was torn up with the same claw marks that were on my deck. That morning, I called the local hardware store in town, about half an hour away. I explained the situation, leaving out that a monster had attacked, and saying instead that a deer had crashed into my door, and I asked if it was possible if they could get a heavy wooden door to replace mine, and if they could install it the same day. They referred me to a good contractor, who I called, and he said he could get it done today, especially after I told him I'd double his rate if he got it done. As I sat at my kitchen table, still shaken from the previous night's events, wondering what I was going to do tonight, I noticed a corner of a piece of paper sticking out from under the fridge. Curious, and looking for anything to take my mind off what I'd experienced, I rescued the paper from under the fridge and took a look at it. It was the note from the previous homeowner, the one I'd completely forgotten about. Its message, about always shutting the outside door before turning the light off, suddenly made much more sense to me. So did why the house was priced for so cheap. I cursed the previous owner for leaving me in the dark about this nighttime visitor. When the contractor arrived, he let out a long whistle as he surveyed the damage. "You said a deer crashed into your door. Must have been a hell of a thing chasing it to make those claw marks on your deck. You're lucky the door didn't break down. You'd have had a hell of a mess to clean up." I nodded glumly, feigning ignorance about the claw marks in my deck. As he was installing my new door, he noticed my porch light. "You know, I could run back to Earl's Hardware after I'm finished with this door, pick up a motion-activated floodlight and install it for you. I'm sure it'd help keep those nighttime critters away." Thank God for that man, because my brain at that time was so in shock, I hadn't even considered something like that. It seemed my nightly guest didn't like light, so a motion-activated light would keep it at bay forever. I thanked him profusely, taking him up on his offer. After that day, things went back to normal for a long time. Months went by, and even though I would tense up every time at night when I saw the motion light go off, I didn't find any tracks near my house. I never heard a trace of the creature anywhere near my property. I even asked my neighbors how things were going for them, and if they'd had any nightly disturbances. Their answer was always no, so I figured my problems were all over and done with. That is, I thought my problems were over until the later winter months, and I began to notice the motion light staying on for longer and longer durations. Shadow began to get scared even stepping a foot outside when the sun went down, and I began to see the familiar odd tracks in the winter snow. Every couple of days, I'd see them move closer and closer towards the house. I swear I even heard that low hissing growl one night. It floated up on the wind when I lingered by the open back door, wanting to see the stars. That door was shut and locked the moment the sound hit my ears. I was feeling like a prisoner in my own home again, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find where the previous homeowner had gone, and none of the neighbors had anything like this happening to them. I thought the motion light was a surefire solution, but that was falling apart and I didn't know why. But then I found the note again, hidden under a pile of junk mail on my kitchen table. It still read the same ominous message it had when I first moved in, but desperation made me do something I hadn't done before. I flipped it over, and to my surprise, there was another message written on the back. Shooting it just makes it pissed. Only bright light will drive it away. Don't use the outside lights too much, though. It'll get used to them. Now I think I may be in some serious trouble.
Now we move further into Darktown. In the dim light of the living room, shadows dance along the walls, whispering secrets of something lurking just out of sight. At first, it's merely the sound of creaking floorboards in the dead of night. But then the whispers grow louder, beckoning from the darkness. It's Inside Your House by Michael Page.
It wakes you. Not the moan of a withered hag or the fleeting voice of a dead man, but the low trill of wind slipping past your window, air being pressed into hushed breath. The shadows meld themselves back into your bedroom. You blink. The blurred, hazy object of your alarm clock focuses back to existence. 2:48 a.m., the numbers decree. You don't want to be awake. You don't even want to keep your eyes open. Yet here you are. Outside, the air stirs in utter turmoil, churning up to 50 miles an hour and beating against your home. You'd known this was coming. In fact, you'd known it the moment you'd seen those thunderheads pulling in from the west, lightning forking within them. From the storm's downdraft came bursts of pine-lace wind, sharp and deceptively sweet. A destructive force careening from the Atlantic all the way through the barrens, a large tract of wild, unbroken wilderness. You've often seen in the distance the tall, stalky pines of its dark woods, shivering in the gales. It's been a gusty time for Jersey this year. What was it you were dreaming about, anyway? Who knows? The information is already lost to the senseless grumble of thoughts trying to piece the dream back together. Gone. Although an image of falling water still rests vividly in your mind. Your bladder sends a signal to your brain, demanding relief. Half awake, you mechanically saunter down the short hall to the bathroom. You flick the lights on. Too bright. You rub away the floaters and zigzags from your eyes. You yawn as your soles scrape over the cold tiles, and then yawn again as you complete your natural business. Sweet release. You flush and lift the faucet handle to wash your hands. A sound. Your gaze flicks toward the door. You listen again. Silence, save for the occasional squeak and groan of the walls, probably from the breeze battering them outside. Whatever it was, you're too tired to care. Glass shatters. Wakefulness spikes through you now as this new sound resonates, crawling up from the dark of downstairs. You pull a sharp inhale down your throat. Your wet hands flinch soapy pellets over the countertop. Stop. Breathe. Calm yourself. It could have been anything, like a tree branch or some other debris that got swept up and propelled through the window. That's it, you tell yourself, nodding, hoping. A loud, powerful thud bangs downstairs, and hope flees. Now, muffled movement. A break-in, a burglar. Horror films you haven't seen in years slide through your mind like celluloid movie reels. Your reflection in the mirror turns goosey white, contorted with fear. The police, your thoughts propose. Call the police. Your eyes trace the room for your phone. It's still lying on your bed. There's still time. You can rush back there, barricade the door, and call the police from the closet. How long will it take them to get here? Doesn't matter. Just call them. You grip the doorknob, ready to sprint straight to your room. The thump, thump, thump on the stairs freezes your limbs. Something fast and large bounds down your hallway just beyond the door. Something so terrible, so lively, that even the deepest folds of your nightmares could never recreate this moment. Vibrations roll by your toes. Feet like heavy pegs tromp up to your bedroom door. It swings open, bashing clumsily against the wall at the forced entry. You stand there, anchored to the cold tiles of the bathroom, paralyzed by the shock of it all. The short space to your room fills with thrashing sounds, bedsheets being ripped and torn asunder, the box springs squeaking and jittering violently. Your fingers, still welded to the doorknob, refuse to twist it an inch further. A few steps away, something of significant size and savagery guts your mattress, the place you'd been just moments ago. A cold wash starts at your chest and drips down to your groin. Your breathing is now terse as your heart pumps with a new and sudden weight. Your mouth is dry, your throat rubber. Focus. These are the impulses you must hold on to. The hot blood mounting up in your throat, the intensity dilating your pupils and lacing your eyes red. The lift in your gut from an absolute freefall. These things, hardwired into your system, will keep you alive tonight. The thrashing stops. A rapid cackling emerges. High, scratchy sounds grow louder as they echo down the hallway, expelling from a mouth you dare not imagine. The cackles sputter into bleating, like a goat coughing up mucus. Not the sound of a burglar. Not at all. The thing moves again, its hammer feet pound in chaotic pacing until it finally stops and settles on something. Whoom, whoom, whoom. A succession of bangs on the closet door. Why? Because it thinks that's where you are. But what is it exactly? Oh, you can't stay here. You need to leave before it finds you. The cords in your hand tighten over the handle. You mentally prepare to enter the hallway. In your periphery, your bleached reflection in the mirror verifies your struggle with that simple action. But still, the hope of escape eases the gritty feelings of leaving this small, safe place. You turn the knob fully now. The door opens, thankfully without a creak. You move quietly down the hall, light on the balls of your feet. The walls groan again as another draft clambers over them. The windows flash. The lightning is so close you can hear the crackling particles. You peer back toward your bedroom to make sure its attention hasn't left the closet. Whoom! Another pound against it signals back, much louder out here. You continue, each measured step as slow as possible. Just one sound, one small little thump in the carpet. That's all it will take to alert something truly horrible. As you draw closer to the stairs, a sullen urgency pushes you to move just a little faster. You have this screaming urge to run, to barrel down the stairs and leap out the front door in nothing but your underwear. But you resist. Judging by how quickly you close the gap from the stairs to your bed, you have no difficulty guessing who would win in the mad scramble. Not without a head start, at least. A terrible crash reverberates behind you. The closet's been freed from its hinges. Heavy feet start moving again. It's coming. You kick off from your heels and practically vault the rest of the way. You round the stairs and take the first few steps. The grandfather clock that you kept in the entryway has toppled flat on its face and now blocks the front doorway. No, not toppled. Pushed. Chunks of glass riddle the floor from the broken window in the living room. You could push the clock out of the way, open the door just enough to slide through and get out, but there's no time. Deranged chatters move down the hallway behind you. It's closing in fast. Your bare soles clap against the stairs. You reach the bottom and wind around to the living room. Pain jolts up your leg. A sharp bit of glass is pricked into your foot. The shard crunches and embeds itself deeper into the nerve. Desperate, you fall toward the coffee table and roll beneath it. Heavy stomps now bang all the way down to the bottom step. You put a hand over your mouth. You squeeze your eyes shut. Another sickish bleat croaks out of the thing. It wanders around the room. Wind whips through the broken window, kicking up the drapes. The steps are loud, like the hard heel of a dress shoe, as it clucks against hard wood. Different scents now trace your nose, a scent you can almost recognize. Something sharp and green, like being outside. It's that Yulish scent of pine needles again, now blended with a thick, manure-y musk. That smell of the dark woods. Each hard step sends tremors through you. Don't look. Don't even take a breath. Don't think of what it'll do if it finds you. How vivid those thoughts teeming with horrors are. How quickly your screams will be silenced by teeth. How great the amount of blood that will pool out of your newly opened flesh, ripped and tattered like your bedsheets. Do not look. But of course, you look. Your eyes negotiate with the surrounding darkness, and you immediately regret looking. The deep sting of your foot no longer reaches you. The shock numbs the bulking fear welling up in your chest. Long black legs canter near you, tiered with fur. They are like the legs of a winter skinny deer capped with bony, cloven hooves. Behind them snakes a forked, leathery tail. A mouth you cannot see clicks its cuspids. The thing whoops loudly and then cackles like a hyena. No, your thoughts murmur, like the devil. The bony feet circle around and vanish into the black gap of the kitchen. A chair scoots as though brushed involuntarily. A clatter of things clang onto the floor, pots and pans falling from their racks. You cautiously adjust your placement beneath the table. The pain in your soul sharpens again. Are you bleeding? Will it be able to smell the blood? To taste it lingering in the air? No, if that were the case, it would have found you by now. A vision you don't feed for very long. Perhaps you can wait it out. Stay hidden until it gives up and moves on. A vain hope. It heard you run down the stairs. It knows you're still here somewhere. You allow yourself to swallow, feeling unhinged by it all. This isn't your house anymore. It's somewhere else. Some dark side of some distant planet you don't belong on. A place where something with hooves, is stalking the halls, looking for you. The back door, maybe. No, you recall how the rollers were starting to stick and squeak lately. Oh, too loud. And even if you did manage to squeeze through in time, the thought of having to outrun the thing fills you with immense dread. You look to the broken window. The frame is spiked with shards waiting to slice through an artery, not to mention all the scattered fragments your feet would surely find again. Running would be impossible after that. An idea suddenly clicks. The car keys. You left them on the kitchen counter. They should still be there, mockingly close. If you can just reach them and sneak into the garage, you can get out of here. And that, you reflect, sounds like a good plan. The thing migrates from the kitchen and clucks down the hall. Its cloven feet thump down more stairs. The basement. It must think you've gone there. That'll buy you some time. Not very much, though. Out you go from the coffee table. You breathe softly, small jitters rattling your lungs. You pause a moment to brush a few fingers across your foot to get the glass out. It works some, but you'll need tweezers to get the rest of those evil bits. In the kitchen, you glance about for your keys. Some pans and a dirty skillet litter the floor. The spice rack is toppled, and a feathery art piece of garlic powder has formed on the porcelain. You move forward toward the counter with cautious steps. From the lower level, a muted crash rises up. Something else has been forcibly shoved over. You must hurry. You spot the keys. You stretch out your blood-speckled fingers and curl around them, carefully lifting them so as to not let them jingle in your grip. Another thought dawns on you and leads your hand next to the cutlery drawer. Sharp metal things rattle inside as you open it, much too loud for comfort. But you find and grab the sharpest knife there, so the noise is well worth it. A calculated risk. Having both the keys and the knife in your hands offers a small dose of victory, but you still need to make it down the hall, past the basement stairwell and into the garage. You peer down the corridor and hug the wall as you walk it. You pass by the basement quickly, imagining just for a moment something ready to screech its way out of the pitch. But in just a few paces, you've reached the doorway to the garage. You grasp the doorknob and pull the door open. A new sound reaches you from behind, a wet, acknowledging grunt. You turn. From out of the unseen stairwell, a long, muscular neck twists towards you. Its hooves scrape into the hall. The house flashes with another strobe of lightning, giving feature to its tall, amorphous shape. Its jagged horns extend outwards, coil back in a goatish curl. Leathery skin hangs down from its thick-haired body, hitting its backside in wrinkled folds. Eyes the color of muddy water. Eyes that have finally found you. And reaching out of the mottled fur, a skinless, horsey face composed of yellowed, still living bone. It clicks its teeth again. Sharp. Waiting. Your hand does not move from the door handle. It clenches almost as tightly as the other hand does around the knife, both trembling. The blade is no more than a paperclip compared to the thing before you, twitching its talons. One of your feet is already out the door, squeezed into the small crack of the garage, but there was never going to be a clean escape. It would never allow such a thing. The fear now settles into your legs, grasping the inside of them. It seeps into your joints, turning them into mulch. Thoughts cease altogether. In the next instant, you force yourself to move as everything else moves in rapid order. The door pulling open, hooves beating closer, a high, shrillish cackle. You squeeze into the garage, chased by hot, bestial breath brushing up your neck and down your shoulder. You move to sweep the door closed, but 3 hellish claws slip through the gap. They hook into the thin wood, propping the entry open against their leathery skin. It moves on the other end, tugging angrily at the panel. You pull against it with every cord, every tendon burning in your forearm. You jam the keyring into your mouth while the other hand struggles to keep hold of the knife. The thing yips loudly from the other end. Its thick stench clings to your face. It's strong, and as the pressure from its grasp continues to climb, you know that it's winning. In one quick motion, you plunge the knife deep into the webbing of its talons. A horrible sound, much like the yowl of a dying cat, brays from the other side of the door. Dark crimson blood runs down the steel and drips off in red tears. The claws retract, taking the handle with them as the door finally closes. You climb inside your car, unwilling to take another breath until the keys finally find the slots. The engine rouses to life, and all the symbols on the dash light up in green and amber. You yank the gear stick into reverse, and nearly back the trunk straight into the garage door, thankfully catching yourself and clicking the opener just above your head. The door pulls open with a squeal of rollers and hinges. Even before the metal sheet comes to a stop overhead, you back out and slope down the street. Hands still shaking, you simultaneously switch the gear to drive and slam a hurt foot over the gas pedal. The car peels down the road, revving higher and higher until your house and street are out of sight completely. You look to the rear view, partially anticipating to see it back there, standing tall and upright beneath a street lamp. But there is nothing. You've done it. You've escaped. Your wide, veiny eyes find the road again, as a spasm of wind nearly knocks you off course. It doesn't matter where you're going, not right now anyway. All that matters is getting as far away as possible. A thin laugh shivers out of you, perhaps jovial, perhaps just a bit too manic. You slow down a little, finally allowing some calmness to penetrate through the panic. The wind still howls and sweeps over your vehicle, but as it quiets, a different sound rises behind it. like two heavy tarps flapping about. You look at the side mirrors and again at the rear view. Did you just see something? A thud sounds on the roof. You take another breath and depress the accelerator.
In our final tale this evening, we venture outside of town. When Eric, his girlfriend Wendy, and their friends Bill and Ashley head out for a hunting trip, they expect nothing more than a weekend in the wilderness. Armed with only a rifle and a pistol, the group ventures deep into the woods, but their peaceful getaway quickly spirals into a nightmare. After a chance encounter with a park ranger warning them of a missing child abducted by a terrifying creature, the friends are thrust into a desperate fight for survival. Eric and the others must face the horrifying truth. They are not alone. They may not make it out alive. The Cabin in the Woods by G.R. Dark.
It was the beginning of fall when my friend Bill and I decided to go hunting out in the woods. We had an elk tag and decided to bring our girlfriends with us. Now, allow me to introduce myself. My name's Eric, and my girlfriend's name is Wendy. My friend Bill's girlfriend was Ashley. We traveled in the same car and went to the plaza for supplies. We only brought one rifle and a pistol with us, a .30-06 and a .357 Magnum for self-defense against bears. Bill had a cabin out in the woods that was a 4-hour drive. He has 2 rooms and an outhouse, so it was good enough for us. We'd arrived at the cabin and unpacked our stuff, and the time was around 4 p.m., so we still had some time to go out and look for our elk. The girls wanted to stay at the cabin and relax, and told us that they'd have dinner ready when we got back. So Bill and I got our hunting stuff, and we were on our way to a secret hunting spot where we always find a good-sized elk. We were about halfway to our spot when the park ranger pulled us over and started to inspect our vehicle. "Why are you searching us? We haven't even shot anything yet," Bill asked. "Well, I could see that, but I'm not looking for poachers. A little girl was kidnapped while camping with her parents. Parents said what looked like a 9-foot-tall skinny shadow with antlers on its head ripped a hole in their tent and grabbed her," the ranger said. And he said the father tried to hold on to the little girl, but was overpowered by the creature as the mom just watched in shock, not believing what she was seeing. "The parents didn't have a pistol?" I asked. "No, the family was only here to camp and only had a bear mace, but it was in their vehicle," he replied. "The father said once the thing grabbed his daughter, he ran out into the woods. Last thing he heard was his daughter crying and screaming, 'Daddy!' Now, if you guys see anything like that or know of the little girl's whereabouts, come to a ranger tower and ask for Rick," he continued. "Oh, yes, sir, we will," I said, and then he went back to his car and left. "I know where a ranger station is if we see anything. That sounds like a Wendigo. Might have come from the tribal land on the other side," said Bill. "Don't be a racist, Bill," I laughed. "Not all the Native Americans are witches and do black magic." "How do you know, Eric?" Bill replied. "I worked with a couple back in the day. I have friends that are Native American," I explained. We then drove to our spot and sat down for a couple of hours, calling an elk when we finally attracted one. Bill had shot it, and it ran away from us. We tracked it for a couple of hours when I noticed the sun was starting to set. "Yeah, how about we come back in the morning and look for it?" I suggested. "No," he objected. "What if it's still alive?" I said. "No," Bill said. "Bill, it's getting too dark. Even if we see him and he's still alive, you won't be able to see through your scope." And that's when the elk started to scream. "There he is," said Bill as we ran to the location where it was. We heard something growl like, well, something I'd never heard before. The elk started to scream like it was being torn apart. "Shit," Bill said as we ran faster to the elk. I grabbed the .357 and started to fire it in the direction the elk was screaming to scare whatever it was off. When we got to the elk, there was nothing but the head and its back legs. The rest of the elk had been torn to pieces. "Ah, shit," Bill exclaimed. "Do you think that was a bear?" I asked. "I don't know," he replied. Let's just get the head, tag it, and go back to the cabin. All right, but let's tell Ranger Rick that a bear's out here, Bill said. Okay, we will, tomorrow. We grabbed the head and packed it into the truck, then went back to the cabin. We got back home, and Wendy was cooking burgers and chili over the fire. Yeah, the boys are here, Wendy yelled to Ashley, informing her of our arrival. Bill looked at me and said, Don't say anything about what Ranger Rick said. Okay, I simply replied. We got out and went over to the girls and sat down to eat outside. We were about to finish the food when Ashley asked how the elk hunt had gone. It was a goddamn bear that got our elk when we shot it, so we just took the head and called it good, Bill said. Well, that's too bad. But how about we have a couple of shots to celebrate for the elk head? Ashley suggested. Bill yelled, Oh, that's just what I need. It was a long day. Ashley pulled out a half-gallon of whiskey and started to take shots with Bill. Wendy came over and said, How about you, Eric? Want some? Yeah, that'll take whatever happened today off of my mind, I said. We started to get a little drunk when I had to take a piss. The outhouse was behind the cabin. I went to use it and noticed it was really dark back there. The fire was the only light we had, and it was in front of the cabin. I just pissed where they couldn't see me. I was looking in the dark when I noticed a tall, skinny figure with glowing red eyes watching me. I got spooked and ran back to the others with my pants unbuttoned. When I got there, Bill was laughing at me while looking at my unbuttoned pants. I told them that something was out there watching us. Bill didn't believe me, just said that maybe I'd drunk too much. Ashley said she and Wendy were getting tired and it was getting late, so we got ready for bed, turned out all the lights, and went to sleep. I got up around 11 p.m. to get a bottle of water in the cooler that was outside. And that's when I heard Wendy scream. I dropped my water and ran to the truck and grabbed the 357 and hurried back to the cabin. Ashley and Bill had turned on a lantern and were asking Wendy what was up. Wendy said that she was awakened by my voice, telling her to wake up and come to the back. She said that I was by the window, so she got up and looked out the window. That's when she saw a black figure with red eyes looking at her. She froze as the thing tried to grab her, mimicking my voice and saying her name. Wendy began to cry as I walked over to her and said, "Oh, don't cry, Wendy. It's nighttime. You'll only call it back or something else." "Call what back?" Ashley asked, wondering. It's nothing," Bill said. "We're all just really tired." "Bullshit, Bill. Sounds like the thing that took that little girl that Ranger Rick told us about." Ashley went to comfort Wendy as Bill and I were arguing. Then we all heard something jump onto the roof. It was mimicking a little girl's laugh as it ran around. It was calling for Wendy as it jumped off in front of the door. I gripped the 357, ready to fire it at the door. "Hey, don't shoot. We're still a little drunk, and we don't know if any of this is real," Bill said, stopping me from firing. He asked me to turn off the lantern and see if the thing would go away. But right when I turned it off, the thing opened the door and ran inside and grabbed Wendy. We just froze with fear as it dragged Wendy out of the door. Ashley was holding onto Wendy as it dragged both of them and yelled, "Help me, you freaking cowards!" I came and aimed the pistol at it and fired a couple of rounds. The thing dropped Wendy and ran outside before I could hit it again. Bill finally snapped out of it and said, "You guys stay here. I'm going to run to the truck, grab the rifle, and start the truck. We need to get the hell out of here." "Oh, Bill, don't. What if that thing's still out there?" Ashley asked. "Look, if you guys want to stay here with that thing, be my guests," Bill yelled. "I'm going to start the truck and get my rifle, get you guys so we can get out of here. Eric, you close the door when I run to the truck." "Bill, I only have 4 more rounds in the pistol," I said. "That's why we gotta get out of here," Bill yelled, and then ran to the truck. I closed the door after he left and said, "Right, you guys better get ready." They nodded their heads. We heard the truck start up. That's when we heard a shot out of the 30-06 and Bill's scream. We waited for 30 minutes in the pitch dark inside the cabin, But Bill did not come back. Ashley began to start crying for Bill, but I told her to try and keep it in. There's no crying at night, Ashley. It'll only bring that thing back. We need to make a run to the truck and get to the ranger station. Ashley said, "What about Bill? I'm not going to leave him here." "Look, we'll get the rangers to help us find Bill when we come back," I reassured her. We ran to the truck and saw nothing of the 3006 on the ground. There was no trace of Bill. I grabbed the rifle and told the girls to get in. Wendy got in first, and Ashley was about to get in when she heard Bill's voice. "Ashley, help me," Bill's voice said. "Where are you?" "I'm behind the cabin. Hurry," cried Bill. Ashley started to run to where Bill's voice was when I told her to stop because it could be that thing mimicking Bill. But Ashley didn't care and started calling out Bill's name, running out into the woods. Wendy hurried and closed the door. I got in and punched it out of there. I don't know what happened to Ashley and Bill, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. It took about an hour to get to the ranger station. When we got there, it looked like the thing had beaten us to it. There was no one there, but huge claw marks on the walls. I got out and told Wendy to stay in the car, and if anything happened, to just leave me there. I went inside the ranger station to find that Ranger Rick had been decapitated. Then I heard Wendy scream, and I immediately ran back outside. I could see the thing standing there, holding Wendy by the neck. It was 9 feet tall, skinny with glowing red eyes and deer antlers on its head. Wendy screamed for me to help her, but I just ran inside the ranger station and closed the door as the thing took off with her. I waited for the thing to come and get me too, but it didn't. I fell asleep until morning. I got up and went out to the truck. It had run out of gas, so I gathered up what little food and ammunition I had left and got ready for another night of hell. I found this journal to write about what had happened to us. So, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. My advice to you is don't cry at night. If you happen to go to the Native American reservation, find a medicine man to bless you off and bless this cabin off. And they would know what that thing was or what happened here. Oh, they should know. It's right by their land. And that's all I know. Until then, goodbye.